Chapter 1423. Here, Yang Chun with Gao Yu and Gong Sunling slowly enjoyed the process of his magic weapon, absorbing a huge amount of spiritual power and slowly upgrading. On the other side, the high-level members of the Taishaman, as well as Yang Lan and Yang Lan, have been living like a year. Time passed slowly for about 10 days, and the worries of Sect Master Li and several core high-level members had reached the apex. The Heaven and Earth Infinite Essence Suppression Array had reached this point, and it had been trembling because of the absorption of too much spiritual power. Anyone could see that this was a precursor to the collapse of the Heaven and Earth Infinite Essence Suppression Array. Things had developed to this point, and the Taishaman had been forced to the cliff. They could only rely on the Heaven and Earth Infinite Essence Suppression Array to rob the spiritual power of the outside world, and then consume those masters to death. When no one could threaten the safety of the Taishaman, then one by one, the masters would go out to cross the tribulation. The whole process, Sect Master Li estimated that it would take thousands of years. Anyway, it was said before that the Taishaman would seal the mountain for 1,000 years, and Sect Master Li was not in a hurry. However, with the trembling of the Heaven and Earth Infinite Essence Suppression Array, all the high-level members began to panic. Once the Heaven and Earth Infinite Essence Suppression Array collapsed, and the sect outside had spiritual power again, then the current stalemate would continue for a long time. The sect coalition had to besiege the Taishaman and look for opportunities all the time, and the Taishaman would still be trapped in this Demon Seal Array. There was no way to cross the tribulation, and there was no way to improve. That was a disaster for the Taishaman. Similarly, Yang Lan and Yang Lan, who were in the special eye of the array, were also panicking. As Sect Master Li guessed, everything had limits. The Demon Seal Array had limits, and the Heaven and Earth Infinite Essence Suppression Array also had limits. Based on the same principle, Yang Lan and Yang Lan's bodies had limits. Before experiencing the baptism of the Thunder Tribulation, Fire Tribulation, and Wind Tribulation, the bodies of the two Jidon stage could only reach the realm of the 3rd or 4th grade of the human immortal. If it was higher, the spiritual power would burst the body. The strength of the formation core depended on the expert in the formation core. Now, the trembling of the Heaven and Earth Limitless Origin suppressing formation was a sign that they were about to reach their limits. At this moment, the formation core was connected to their bodies. If their bodies could withstand it, the formation core would be fine. If they couldn't, the formation core would explode. In fact, if they could immediately go through the heavenly tribulation while absorbing the spiritual energy, their bodies would be transformed to become more powerful after each heavenly tribulation. After the transformation, they would naturally be able to contain more spiritual energy and increase their cultivation. But the problem was that Yang Lan and Yang Lan were both in the Demon Seal Array. No matter how strong their cultivation base was now, no matter what level their realm had reached, Heaven's retribution was always isolated outside the Demon Seal Array, and it would never come easily. Under such circumstances, it was very difficult for the two of them to continue to absorb more spiritual power. However, even so, in just over a month's time, others had at most advanced by one small realm, and at most two small realms, so much so that they were on the verge of breaking through to the next realm. Yang Lan and Yang Lan, on the other hand, had crossed the Yuanying stage and the Deshang stage from the Jiedon stage in one fell swoop and directly entered the human immortal level. At this point, the spiritual power cultivation base could not continue to increase, and the spiritual power from the outside world was still pouring in, which was terrible. In order to avoid the fate of being blown up by the spiritual power, Yang Lan and Yang Lan had to stop anyway and come out of the special formation core. The problem was that if they went out directly now, the special formation core would stop and the Heaven and Earth Limitless Origin suppressing formation would slowly return to normal. Next, if they did not cross the tribulation, they would immediately face the questioning of Sect Master Li and several core elders. The time was too short, and Li Liheng could only design the process reasonably, but it was not reasonable to the point of being completely flawless. As long as they were questioned a few more times, The confession between the two would be compared several times, and it would be easy to find the problem. Once Sect Master Li and the core elders determined that the brother and sister were the culprits of all this, their fate could be imagined. Yang was never willing to go to that step. The reason why he designed it together with Li Liheng was not to fight for a chance of survival for himself. Therefore, at this point, Yang Lan were already like arrows on the bowstring and had to be released. And now they had to find a suitable opportunity to trigger the arrangement of the Demon Seal formation when everyone was not paying attention to them. Sect Master Li and several core executives were staring at the Special Formation Core almost all day long. Yang Lan could not find any opportunity at all. He could only force himself to push the original plan. The Control Elder of the Demon Seal formation disc. From the appearance, no one would be able to see that he was hypnotized. Even he himself did not have this awareness, and he never found out that he had been hypnotized. People who have not cultivated the Free Demon Heart Sutra will never understand the mystery of the Free Demon Heart Sutra. If you think that the Free Demon Heart Sutra can only improve the spiritual awareness cultivation base, then it is a big mistake. The most powerful thing about it was that it could control others without anyone noticing. The elder who controlled the second Demon Seal formation disc had unknowingly walked to the side of the core elder who controlled the other formation disc. Such a move did not arouse anyone's suspicion, and no one took it seriously. After all, being able to control the second formation disc has fully demonstrated the sect's trust in him. But it was this elder of the Yuanying stage who was fully trusted by the sect, who suddenly started when everyone was staring at the special formation core. The silent flying sword pierced the chest of the elder who controlled the formation disc, and then he let go of the access restriction of the Taishaman's Demon Seal formation and lifted the shackles of the Demon Seal formation. Next, hundreds of divine thunders of various attributes appeared beside the elder, and all of them were detonated. Sect Master Li and several core elders were not far away. The sudden change made them have no time to react at all. They watched helplessly as the demon sealing array was opened, and then they were covered by a series of divine thunder explosions. Originally, they wanted to snatch back the formation disc and reopen the demon seal formation, but the explosion of a large number of divine thunders stopped everyone. In the rumbling sound, in this area, people below the Yuanying stage were all blown up by the divine thunders. Even the masters of the Deshang stage, such as Sect Master Li, were all injured. This was not all. What made Sect Master Li and the core elders desperate was that the tribulation clouds began to condense in the sky in an instant, and the aura of countless tribulations fell wildly. Those masters who have been pushed to the edge of the tribulation in the past 40 days, whether it was the Thunder Tribulation or the Yin Fire Tribulation, all were triggered. Chapter 1424. It's over. In the heart of Sect Master Li, this thought flashed in his mind for the first time. The same was true for several core elders around him. Although the explosion of the divine thunder did not take their lives, it took away all their hopes. Although the heaven and earth everlasting origin suppression array showed signs of collapse, it had not yet collapsed, and it continued to absorb spiritual power. As long as it did not collapse for a day, then there was hope for Taishaman. But now, the problem was not in the array, but in the people. No one would have thought that the person who was given absolute trust by the high level, and even the formation plate of the demon sealing array, which was related to the life and death of Taishaman, turned out to be the deepest enemy in the sect. At this time, as long as the Taishaman saw this scene happen, the first reaction in their mind must be that the guy was a traitor and an undercover agent. As for who the undercover agent was, it was no longer important. Anyway, it was nothing more than one of the coalition forces of the sect outside. They didn't know when the spy arranged by those guys broke out at the most dangerous time of the Taishaman and gave the Taishaman a heavy blow. If there were not many people crossing the tribulation at the same time, the power of the tribulation would be greatly increased. The Taishaman would definitely have the power to fight. With so many masters, as long as they started to cross the tribulation, even if others wanted to affect them, they had to cross thousands of miles in a short time to affect them. The tribulation only needed to cross the 9 thunder tribulations and the Yin fire tribulation, and it would not take too long. Once more than 20,000 Yuanying stage masters and more than 1,000 Dashang stage masters were in place, plus the original mountain protection array of the Taishaman and the arrangement in a mountain gate for so many years, it was not impossible to be on a par with the coalition forces of the sect outside. But now, everything was over. Once the masters without the cover of the demon sealing array faced the tribulation at the same time, more than 20,000 thunder tribulations and more than 1,000 fire tribulations came at the same time. No matter how strong the masters were, they could not escape under the power of that kind of tribulation. For the time being, Sect Master Li could only make a decisive decision. 10 years is not too late for a gentleman to take revenge. Since the disciples in front of him could not be saved, then he would make their sacrifice worthwhile. Let's go. I will rise again in the future. Sect Master Li called out to several core high-level members and sent them into his portable cave residence. Then his figure flashed and disappeared quickly. The movements of the Taishaman immediately attracted the attention of the sect's allied forces. They soon discovered that the demon sealing formation that the Taishaman relied on to keep them out of the mountain gate had disappeared without a trace after the violent commotion. The sect's experts were overjoyed. Just as they were about to rush in, they sensed the heavenly tribulation's aura in the sky. The scene of those experts crossing the tribulation 10 days ago was still vivid in their minds. Who would dare to risk their lives and rush in at this time? The experts who rushed out stopped in their tracks and stared at the Taishaman from afar. Not long after, the entire sky became pitch black again, without a trace of light. Then, the hundreds of thousands of experts from the sect's allied army saw their most spectacular heavenly tribulation. The first to fall was the Thunder Tribulation. More than 20,000 ancestors at the peak of the Gold Core realm went through the Thunder Tribulation at the same time. How spectacular it was. Within the people's field of vision, all the sky was covered with flashing thunder, leaving no gap. The first Thunder Tribulation fell, as if the whole sky had fallen and fell on the mountain gate of the Taishaman. The extremely terrifying thunder, with a dazzling light that made people unable to look at it, suddenly exploded. The huge sound was dozens of times stronger than the loudest sound that hundreds of thousands of cultivators had ever heard in their lives. In an instant, the sound alone almost made tens of thousands of cultivators lose their footing. Countless people covered their ears as if they could no longer stand the terrible sound. Boom! The Taishaman seemed to be lit up. After a dazzling flash, the Thunder Tribulation's aura in the sky was reduced by at least half. Everyone understood that the aura was reduced by half, which meant that at least half of the people had died in the Thunder Tribulation just now and failed to cross the tribulation. Although the number of people was reduced by half, the power of the second Thunder Tribulation that followed was no less than the first. Boom! There was another deafening noise, and the mountain gate of the Taishaman was once again lit up. After this time, the Thunder Tribulation in the sky was less than a quarter of the original. After the third Thunder Tribulation fell, there were only a few Thunder Tribulations aura left in the sky. However, this also reduced the power of the collective Thunder Tribulation to a minimum. There were less than 100 ancestors at the peak of the Gold Core realm. After paying the price of more than 60 people, they finally made it to the end. More than 80 of them successfully passed the Thunder Tribulation and were promoted to the Yuanying stage ancestors. If everyone thought that this was the end, then it was a big mistake. After the Thunder Tribulation, it was immediately followed by more than 1,000 fire tribulations at the same time. Just like the previous Thunder Tribulation, the process was almost exactly the same. Every time an fire tribulation fell, almost half of the crossing tribulation masters died. After 4 or 5 consecutive fire tribulations, there were only hundreds of fire tribulations left in the sky. Hundreds of peak Yuanying stage masters were distributed within a range of thousands of miles, which effectively weakened the power of the fire tribulation. In the past 40 days, the cultivation bases of these masters have been jaw-dropping. In this impossible situation, more than 40 Yuanying stage masters have successfully been promoted to the Dashang stage. The poor Taishaman disciples, those disciples below the Jidan stage could not even persist in the first thunder tribulation. Under the bombardment of that intensive degree of thunder tribulation, they were unable to escape the attack range of the thunder tribulation. Only the first thunder tribulation destroyed hundreds of thousands of disciples below the Jidan stage. When the first fire tribulation came, those Yuanying stage disciples, especially the dozens of Yuanying stage ancestors who had just been promoted to the Yuanying stage, were directly buried, and their bones were burned by the fire tribulation. Even if they hid in the space magic weapon, they could not escape, and they were all affected. From the beginning to the end, it was only the time for a stick of incense to burn. There were hundreds of thousands of disciples in Taishaman, and there were only a few hundred left. The losses were so heavy that it was simply unbelievable. The surviving masters were almost all Deshang stage disciples. There were new Deshang stage masters who had just crossed their tribulation. There were old Deshang stage masters, and there were more than a dozen great elders among them. With this poor power, if they wanted to fight against the hundreds of thousands of cultivator masters of the Sex Coalition Army, it was simply sending food to their door. However, the nightmare of Taishaman was not over. The fire tribulation had just been completed, and then the tribulation clouds rose again. This time, it was the aura of the wind tribulation. Chapter 1425. This time, the aura of the wind tribulation seemed to be only two, but the aura of the two wind tribulations combined even exceeded the power of more than 100 people crossing the tribulation at the same time. Needless to say, this was the wind tribulation caused by Yanglan and Yanglan. Their cultivation base had exceeded the peak of the Mahayana stage, and the tribulation they triggered was naturally extremely powerful. Under the drive of this tribulation aura, there were 5 or 6 great elders who were enveloped by the tribulation. In order to resist this crazy tribulation aura, they had no choice but to break out with their true strength and immediately attracted the tribulation clouds in the sky. This seemed to have triggered a chain reaction. The distribution of several great elders also covered several other great elders. In an instant, a series of more than a dozen great elders were all dragged in one by one. Very helplessly, one after another, wind tribulation was triggered. The heavens tribulation seemed to be adjusting, setting everyone's tribulation to the same time. After waiting for more than a dozen breaths, the first wind tribulation began to descend. With the strength of these great masters, it was not difficult to bear this round of wind tribulation. Next was the second, the third, until the 6th. The masters of the Sex Coalition Army all felt this scene from a distance. They couldn't catch up even if they wanted to. They could only take the opportunity to observe and accumulate some experience for their future tribulation. When the 7th wind tribulation came, the great elders of Taishaman had gradually gathered together. Since they had already triggered the tribulation, then it was also a good result for everyone to cross the tribulation at the same time. It was a pity that the hundreds of thousands of disciples of Taishaman would disappear like this. To everyone's surprise, when the great elders were about to join forces to resist the 7th wind tribulation, they were suddenly attacked by 2 people. The people who attacked were naturally Yanglan and Yanglan. At this point, they have discovered that their strength could steadily cross the tribulation and ascend, and there was basically no problem. In this case, at this time, they should consider the results after ascending. The great elders definitely knew that they were in a special formation I. Once the people from Black Heaven sect learned something from the great elders who ascended with them, they would verify it with the siblings. If they revealed any flaws, they would die without a burial place. After enduring for so long, even Yanglan suffered so much and endured so much humiliation. Even Yanglan's own pure body was ruined by Li Liheng. What was the reason for this? Wasn't it all so that they could transcend the tribulation and ascend so that they could stand out? If he had spent so much effort to bring it to the spiritual realm only to be killed by the Black Heaven sect, then it would have been a waste of effort. Yanglan would never allow this kind of thing to happen. After quietly informing Yanglan, the two immediately tacitly began to attack the elders around them when the 7th wind tribulation fell. How could the supreme elders, who had been resisting the wind tribulation with all their might, have thought that two people they had never thought highly of would attack them. Only the core elders and Li Liheng knew the magic of the special formation eye. These supreme elders had not yet reached the point of full knowledge. Therefore, although they were curious about Yanglan and Yanglan crossing the wind tribulation together, they did not have much defense. Their own younger generation disciples, in this situation where the sect was almost exterminated, they could only save one more. No one would have thought that the siblings would use the heaven tribulation to attack. The four elders who were the first to be attacked were directly injured by the two people's sneak attacks. Under the power of the heaven tribulation, the four elders no longer had the strength to resist to the end and were directly blown into flying ashes by the wind tribulation. The remaining elders were all shocked. Although they had received the wind tribulation in a hurry, their bodies were all damaged and their strength was greatly reduced. Before the eighth and more powerful wind tribulation fell, the siblings Yanglan and Yanglan had once again hit the four elders. The remaining grand elders couldn't help but have a whole new level of respect for him, and were shocked by his powerful strength. How was it possible? The two juniors of Jidan stage, after staying in the special formation eye for 40 days, actually had the powerful strength to fight against two Taishang elders of their level at the same time, and even easily withstood a wind tribulation in the process of the attack. How is this possible? Although they didn't want to admit it in their hearts, the fact was happening in front of them, and they couldn't help but admit it. Under the interference of their attacks, the eighth wind tribulation, the four grand elders and the other two grand elders once again followed in the footsteps of the previous grand elders, turning into a pile of ashes and dissipating into thin air. On the opposite side of Yanglan and Yanglan, there are only four supreme elders left at the moment, but two of them were injured, and only two of them seem to be intact. Why? Why do you do such a thing of deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors? Taking advantage of the interval when the heaven tribulation fell, one of the intact elders asked sharply, "In order not to let the matter of deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors be known." In this case, Yanglan and Yanglan had already won. In the face of the questioning of the supreme elder, Yanglan unexpectedly answered the elder's question. However, this answer really made people speechless. Doing the thing of deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors was because they were afraid that deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors would be known by others. What a ridiculous reason this was. Unfortunately, Yanglan did not give these elders time to think clearly. While speaking and answering, he had already begun to attack. Above their heads, the final and ninth wind tribulation had already descended soundlessly. At the same time as the four supreme elders aged into flying ashes, Yanglan and Yanglan's bodies burst out with a powerful aura at the same time, rushing straight into the sky. Within a radius of several thousand miles, everyone could feel this powerful aura. All the wise people knew that this was the aura of the two people who had passed the wind tribulation and were about to ascend. Dare to touch my Taishaman. The crime is unforgivable. Although he kept saying that he was deceiving his master and destroying his ancestors, at this time, Yanglan showed a very surprising scene. He shouted in a random direction of the sect's coalition army, "Wait for me to report to the master ancestor of the profound heaven sect. Everything that happened here will be paid in blood." In the wind tribulation, no one knew that Yanglan had attacked their own elders, and no one would take the initiative to lead the wind tribulation to attack themselves. Therefore, no one knew about Yanglan and Yanglan's actions. At this time, Yanglan's voice made the hearts of the masters of the sect sink. Now the Taishamen seemed to be unable to set off any storms, but there was still the profound heaven sect in the spiritual world and the immortal world, which was the real trouble in the future. When the demon seal formation was broken, no one discovered that in a small valley thousands of miles away from the gate of the Taishamen, several figures suddenly appeared. Chapter 1426. These people appeared abruptly. There were a total of 4 of them, each of whom was in the realm of the Deshang stage. After appearing, all 4 people's faces were very ugly, and they all looked in the direction of the Taishamen mountain gate. The momentum of tens of thousands of people crossing their tribulation at the same time was too vast. Even if they were thousands of miles away, they could still feel it. However, none of them dared to explore with their spiritual awareness easily, for fear that someone would discover the movement here. When the Thunder Tribulation was completed and the Fire Tribulation had not yet risen, there was another flash in the valley, and there was another figure not far from the four people. The four people were shocked, and when they looked closely, they found that it was their own sect master, and then they were relieved. Sect Master Lee appeared a little late, but he still caught up with the last chance to escape. The secret passage in a mountain gate that had existed for tens of thousands of years had become the last capital of their escape. This secret passage, in principle, was similar to the magic weapon that appeared in the Langya Well. It was basically a space magic weapon that spanned thousands of miles, going in from that end and then coming out from this end. The difference was that the Langya Well could only be entered by dead things, while the Taishaman could be entered and exited by living people. He casually released the few core elders from his spatial magic treasure. Everyone stared blankly in the direction of the mountain gate, and no one said a word. After a while, the Fire Tribulation was completed, and then the Wind Tribulation began. The huge Wind Tribulation did not last long, and it was soon completed. Everyone was counting. It was 9 Wind Tribulations, and then they felt the 2 auras of Yanglan and Yanglan that were about to ascend. When Yanglan scolded the Sect Coalition forces, everyone heard it. Sect Master Li and several core executives have been in contact with Yanglan, and of course they could hear his voice. It seems that the function of the special formation I is true, and it can really make people ascend. Sect Master Li sighed and suddenly said such a sentence. Several core high-level members also understood that Yanglan could cross the tribulation and ascend because their brother and sister were thrown into a special formation I. Now the facts were in front of them, and everyone knew that the special formation I really had a special function, as Senior Lufengzi said. But this time, what was the point of knowing that the special formation I was useful? The Taishaman are finished. Sect Master Li suddenly burst into tears, thumping his chest and stamping his feet. The foundation passed down by our ancestors has been destroyed in our hands. How can we face our ancestors again? Hundreds of thousands of people, including the disciples who had gone out to train, were all wiped out. Everyone understood that it was impossible for the junior disciples to escape from that kind of heavenly tribulation, and in the end, only 2 of the experts managed to transcend the heavenly tribulation and ascend. The fate of the remaining disciples could be imagined. Even if some people were lucky enough to survive, what would happen to them when they were surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Sect's allied forces? They had never thought that the Sect's allied forces would show mercy to the remaining disciples. Exterminating the weeds from the roots was not a privilege of the secular world. It was also practiced among the cultivators. No, Sect Master, the Taishaman are not finished yet. Just when Sect Master Li was beating his chest and stamping his feet, a core elder next to him said with a serious face, "Sect Master, you are still here, we are still here, the great elder and the others are still here. Although Li Heng made a big mistake, he is still here." The core elder stared in the direction of the Taishaman's mountain gate and said through gritted teeth, "We still have tens of thousands of genius disciples. We still have the demon sealing formation, the heaven and earth boundless origin suppressing formation, and the sex treasure. The Taishaman are still here. After 1,000 years, we will make them pay with their blood." Yes, pay with their blood. The elder's words stirred up their courage, and the experts present all shouted out in excitement. As the slogan of "pay with their blood" was shouted, everyone's emotions were stirred up, and they were no longer as dispirited as before. Go, let them be proud for a while. Sect Master Li also recovered, and his expression became calm. He turned his head without hesitation and flew in another direction. When we appear again, we will make them pay double for everything. Several other elders did not speak anymore, and followed Sect Master Li without hesitation, flying towards the location of the Taishaman's treasure. Yanglan and Yanglan did not stay in the mortal world for too long. After shouting that sentence, they successfully ascended to the spiritual world, and there was no aura left in the mortal world. It was not until this moment that the sect's coalition army reacted and rushed into the mountain gate of the Taishaman from all directions. Everything that everyone saw along the way made everyone feel a burst of horror. Under the cover of the continuous lightning tribulation, fire tribulation, and wind tribulation, there was almost nothing left in the thousands of miles of the mountain gate of the Taishaman. Whether it was the house, the mountain gate, or the mountain protection formation, or the disciples' magic weapons, there was nothing left on the surface except fragments. As for the corpses, after everyone entered the mountain gate, they did not find a single one. All of them were turned into flying ashes by the 3 consecutive major disasters, blown away in the wind, and disappeared without a trace, leaving no trace. Everything seemed to be a dream. The new Taishaman, hundreds of thousands of disciples, absorbed the spiritual power of the world, and created countless masters of the Taishaman, were so easily turned into ashes in front of everyone's eyes. Not to mention ordinary people, even the elders who led the sect couldn't believe it. This was the Taishaman, the world's largest sect. The Taishaman, the leader of the Tao sects, were gone like this. Even if the facts happened in front of them, everyone still felt that they were dreaming. If it was not a dream, how could such a ridiculous thing happen? Even if the Taishaman had offended all the sect in the world, even if the Taishaman had become the public enemy of the world, and even if all the cultivators in the world were to suppress them together from the beginning, all the sect had made up their minds to destroy the Taishaman, even if they had to sacrifice half of the sect and not give them a chance to make a comeback. However, the casualties of the sect at present, not to mention half of the sect, not even 1/10 of the sect's strength had been lost. Apart from some negligible casualties when they destroyed the surrounded Taishaman disciples who had gone out for training, no one was injured in the battle against the main force of the Taishaman. How is this possible? Could it be that they were still dreaming? Countless people rushed to the ruins of the main hall of the Taishaman, pinching themselves every once in a while to make sure that they were not dreaming. Seeing that the representatives from all directions had gathered here, everyone finally confirmed the fact that the Taishaman, the world's largest sect, the leader of the Tao sects, had been destroyed. Chapter 14:27. No one cheered. Instead, they were at a loss. The Taishaman had relied on the unknown super spirit gathering formation to plunder all the spiritual energy in the world and created so many masters. However, in the end, they were destroyed by the simultaneous heavenly tribulations of so many masters. Every sip and every peck, was it destined by the heavens? Among all the masters who participated in the heavenly tribulations, no one knew how the Taishaman's demon sealing formation was broken. Now, all the people who knew about the Taishaman had been annihilated. It was impossible to find them even if they wanted to. Even the chess pieces that the sect had planted in the Taishaman didn't escape. All of them were buried together with the Taishaman. Perhaps a chess piece of a sect had risked his life to do all this. Unfortunately, he had also died. In any case, the sacrifice of these disciples was valuable. From now on, there would be no more Taishaman in the world. The 4 great sect of Taoism were happy. Without the suppression of the Taishaman, the 4 great sect would develop faster and faster. The demon sect was happy. Without the suppression of the Taishaman, the 4 great sect would also have a bright future. The monster clan was happy. Without the oppression of the Taishaman, the monster clan would also have a bright future. The Rogue Cultivators Alliance was happy. Without the threat and hindrance, it was always a happy thing. Perhaps the most unhappy ones were the sect members who had secretly sided with the Taishaman. However, they didn't have the time to be unhappy at the moment. They should have started to worry. After the Taishaman were annihilated, the sect members would definitely get to the bottom of it and settle accounts with the guys who had helped the tyrants. If they wanted to live, they could either hide their identity or change their sect immediately. If they were too late, when the sect members had dealt with the affairs left by the Taishaman, they would definitely die. Finally, after lingering between dream and reality for a long time, the allied forces of the sect finally believed that the Taishaman had really been annihilated. Crazy cheers rose to the sky, and resounded through the ruins of the Taishaman. Didn't Mao Qi say that the formation couldn't be stopped after it was activated? Why isn't it stopping now? Lady Fenghua's angry voice rang in everyone's ears, reminding them of something they seemed to have forgotten. That's right, everything seemed to have stopped. The demon sealing formation, the super spirit gathering formation, everything had stopped. That could only mean one thing. The array formation could be shut down. It was not impossible to shut down, as Mao Qi had said. The super spirit gathering formation was no longer in operation, and the surrounding spiritual power seemed to be slowly seeping out. It was no longer being plundered by the Taishaman. It seemed that the sect was not at the end of its tether. It was estimated that after a while, the spiritual power of the sect would be restored to its original level. In this matter, it meant that the Taishaman had once again deceived everyone. The misunderstanding that they said, the sincerity that they spoke of, were completely deceiving everyone. From the bottom of their hearts, the Taishaman had no intention of shutting down the formation. They were determined to plunder the spiritual power of the world. With this understanding, some sect members who still had a trace of sympathy for the destruction of the Taishaman no longer had any so-called sympathy. The sect members who were afraid that the destruction of the Taishaman would not be righteous were no longer afraid. Everyone could stand up boldly. Even in the face of the questioning from the experts of the Black Heaven sect, they could answer with peace of mind. The destruction of the Taishaman was their own fault. After strengthening their beliefs, it was time for everyone to divide up the Taishaman. On the surface, the things of the Taishaman had been broken into pieces. However, there were still some hidden treasures that were discovered one after another. For example, the Sutra Depository of the Taishaman, the Hall of Heroes, several warehouses, and so on. All the things that were discovered were sealed up by the people of the sect. After an inventory, everyone discussed how to deal with them. In short, the harvest this time was definitely beyond anyone's imagination. The assets left behind by the Taishaman would definitely bring great benefits to all the participating sect members. Standing on the ruins of the Taishaman and facing the Taishaman's relic, no one rushed forward to snatch it. This was already a show of respect to the major sect. Now, they needed a reasonable plan to divide the spoils. Dividing the spoils was a troublesome matter. First, one had to consider the so-called fairness. Of course, there was another premise, which was how much effort each sect had put in, as well as the comparison of everyone's power. It was impossible to be fair and just. How should the legacies of the Taishaman be distributed? How should the resources of the Taishaman be divided? How should the territories of the Taishaman be divided? What awaited everyone was definitely an extremely long and drawn-out debate. Although it only took a few years to eliminate the Taishaman and discover that Li Junyu knew about Li Liheng's conspiracy, it would take at least a few decades to divide the spoils. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and no longer worried about the future. The Taishaman's sect master Li and his party continued to travel carefully. Their whereabouts were concealed for fear that they would encounter someone and be discovered. Even if they could kill them on the spot, they were afraid that there would be some clues left behind. Once the sect's coalition forces found the last territory of the Taishaman, it would definitely be a disaster for those who were struggling to survive. Fortunately, Sect Master Li and his party were lucky. Now everyone's attention was attracted to the gate of the Taishaman, and no one would pay attention to an inconspicuous, desolate place. After a few days and nights of careful travel, Sect Master Li and his party finally arrived at the valley where the Great Elder was located. The demon sealing formation was still working. Sect Master Li and several core elders carefully entered the demon sealing formation and walked towards the valley. This was the place where the Great Elder and the others practiced in seclusion. No one dared to fly casually for fear of disturbing the cultivation of the Great Elder and the others. No one noticed that the original demon sealing formation was slightly different from the current demon sealing formation. This couldn't be blamed on Sect Master Li. The demon sealing formation here was supervised by the Great Elder. Sect Master Li had never been here before. How could they find it? However, when they reached the entrance of the valley, Sect Master Li and the elders did not find a Great Elder coming out to greet them. Could it be that all the great elders happen to be in seclusion? This is impossible. With the shrewdness of the great elder, how could he not arrange for a few people to take turns? What happened here? As soon as they entered the valley, Sect Master Li saw a mess. In the middle of the valley, there was a series of corpses lying side by side, which were the great elders who were in charge of this valley. Fortunately, Sect Master Li did not see any trace of the great elder. Nothing, Sect Master Li. Elders, I have been waiting for you for a long time. A figure that Sect Master Li could never have imagined appeared in front of Sect Master Li with a smile. Chapter 1428. Yang Chun, Grandmaster Yang? Sect Master Li's eyes narrowed, and he stared at Yang Chun, who was walking slowly. Everything in front of them seems to be related to the alchemist Master Yang Chun, who they had never put in their eyes before. Hey, Yang Chun hasn't answered yet, and the two elders behind Sect Master Li have already flown forward, one on the left and one on the right, to outflank Yang Chun. In this situation, the bodies of more than a dozen great elders were placed, and the others were missing, but Yang Chun appeared and said that he had been waiting for a long time. There was no need to ask. There must be something big that they were not happy to see. Anyway, there would be no problem with capturing Yang Chun first and then carefully interrogating him. If the matter is related to Yang Chun and Yang Chun, then it is absolutely right to take Yang Chun. If the matter has nothing to do with Yang Chun, when the Taishaman fled as a whole, it would be a good thing to have a fifth-grade alchemist master by his side. Yang Chun appeared in front of everyone at this time. It was really unlucky. In any case, he couldn't leave. The survivors of Taishaman couldn't let a person who knew they were here leave. The only result of Yang Chun was to be captured and imprisoned by the people of Taishaman, and then until the moment of a comeback. None of the people in front of them thought that the death of the great elders would be related to Yang Chun. Don't look at Yang Chun's tribulation, but his combat effectiveness in front of a group of great elders was simply a docile kitten. Not to mention the great elders. Even Sect Master Li and Elder Jie in front of him could easily capture Yang Chun without any effort. It's not that Sect Master Li is arrogant. It's really that Yang Chun, a fifth-grade alchemist master, has never shown any fighting talent. None of the rumors related to Yang Chun were about fighting. They were all about alchemy. On the other hand, Yang Chun's wives were all fairies with outstanding combat power. The problem was that in the previous battle, Sect Master Li clearly saw their figures outside the gate of the Taishaman sect. Without his wife by his side, Yang Chun was a delicious feast for the Taishaman present. Even though they had just experienced the calamity of extermination, no one took Yang Chun seriously. What they were interested in was why Yang Chun was here, what it had to do with this matter, and why he said that he had been waiting for a long time. Yang Chun's appearance was too strange. Everyone had not realized it before, but now they had reacted. This was the interior of the demon ceiling array set up by the Taishaman. How did an outsider like Yang Chun get in? Sect Master Li had instinctively noticed that something was wrong. He was about to stop the two elders, but it was too late. The two had already rushed to the left and right sides of Yang Chun. Both of the elders were in the middle Deshang stage. Two masters in the middle Deshang stage, teaming up against Yang Chun in the early Deshang stage. It should be absolutely easy. There was no other way to break through this kind of absolute suppression of strength. Li Liheng was able to capture so many talented female cultivators because of this absolute suppression. The forearms had almost caught Yang Chun's body. As long as Yang Chun was touched, he would absolutely not be able to escape. The two elders who made a move had even seen Yang Chun being controlled by them, and then spit out what they knew. However, after all, hope was just hope, and fantasy was just fantasy. What the two elders expected did not happen. Everyone only saw the flash of the blade, and the two elders began to wail. The result of underestimating the enemy was that the four arms quickly left their bodies, and the pain of losing their arms made the two elders unable to make further movements. Many years of pampering have made the elders lose their passion and courage to fight in the past, and at the same time, they have also lost the consciousness of fighting. Before their wailing fell, the blade had already flashed past their necks. Chi-Chi, The blood from the necks of the headless bodies of the two Deshang stage masters rushed up several feet high. The heads had already flown a few feet high, but the bodies of the two were still maintaining their forward posture. But there was no figure of Yang Chun in front of them. The two headless corpses rushed forward for more than a dozen feet before they fell to the ground. In an instant, the two elders in the middle Deshang stage lost their heads, and Sect Master Li didn't even have time to make a move. The remaining two elders, the one with the space magic weapon containing all the reserved disciples of the Taishaman, just released more than a dozen Deshang stage masters from a magic weapon. The other one had already rushed to the side of Sect Master Li, protecting Sect Master Li behind him. On Yang Chen's side, at this moment, it was no longer Yang Chen alone. The figures of Gao Yu and Gong Sunling appeared silently behind Yang Chen, standing quietly, like two slim and graceful flowers, completely incongruous with the blood on the ground. The face of Sect Master Li had already shown a ferocious look. If he still didn't understand that Yang Chen had done something to the Demon Seal formation, then he would be in vain as the Sect Master of the Taishaman. More than a dozen figures appeared with the appearance of Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, and also appeared around Sect Master Li. The appearance of these figures caused a burst of doubt among the Taishaman. Elder Ming, why are you here? Hu Qianni? These figures that appeared were all the original masters of the Taishaman, who were kept in the Mountain River geographical map by Gong Sunling. This time, Gong Sunling released all of them. The masters of the Taishaman who were controlled by Gong Sunling appeared here, not to greet Sect Master Li, but to fight. Yang Chun had told Gong Sunling a long time ago to let her try to use the Deshang stage masters in the Mountain River geographical map to increase the power of the formation. Now, Sect Master Li was facing a group of original Deshang stage masters. As soon as a group of masters appeared, they each occupied a position. To be exact, when Gong Sunling released them, they were in the right position. When the masters of the Taishaman were still surprised why these original elders of their own sect were here, Ming, Guangruo, and Hu Qianni had already started to make their move. Boom! They were in the middle of the formation. The masters who made their move were increased by the formation, and their power was even more terrifying. As soon as they made their move, the remaining dozen or so Deshang stage elders brought by Sect Master Li fell into a passive position. Those who could be brought in the magic weapon of the Immortal's cave, in addition to their important identity, were basically a burden when it was necessary to fight. Under the sudden attack of their original companions, these elders who were brought out were completely suppressed in an instant. Chapter 1429. It was not unusual for a normal array to use a variety of materials, just like the Demon Seal array. It was not unusual for several masters to form a named array to attack at the same time, such as the 5 Elements array of the Morong sisters. In the face of these normal arrays, no matter how powerful it was, when one reached the Deshang stage, there would always be a certain degree of resistance. However, the array in front of them was completely different. The masters themselves were masters, but the masters in the array were not masters. At the same time, they became the materials to arrange the array. This seemingly simple, but more complicated logic than the ordinary array made the Taishaman elders trapped in the array flustered for a while. Another thing that made all the trapped elders tremble with fear was that Ming Guangruo and Hu Qianni could almost be described as not afraid of death. After being trained by Gong Sunling in the Mountain River geographical map, these guys simply did not have the thinking of a normal person. They only knew how to attack crazily. Even in the face of the attack that was about to hit their body, they did not even look at it. It seemed that they only wanted to kill the enemy. The Taishaman elders, who were pampered, did not know how many years they had not experienced a life and death battle. The consequence of being pampered was that in the face of this group of crazy masters, they could not do an effective defense. Flying swords flew all over the sky, and spiritual power attacks were everywhere. Both sides added up to more than 30 Deshang stage elders. The Demon Seal array was only a few hundred miles in radius. The rumbling sound was endless. As far as the eye could see, it was all smoke and dust caused by the battle. Ordinary people could not see anything at all. Everyone in the battlefield relied on their spiritual awareness to identify and find the enemy. Ming Guangruo and Hu Qianyi, the Taishaman masters who were trapped in the Mountain River geographical map by Gong Sunling, were fighting desperately. After a few rounds, they firmly occupied the upper hand. More than a dozen Taishaman elders could only parry and no longer had the power to fight back. The two sides were about to determine the winner. Suddenly, an extremely fierce aura swiftly flashed, and then the entire area within a few hundred kilometers of the Devil Seal Formation suddenly exploded violently. Boom! The powerful explosion directly enveloped everyone in the Demon Seal array, and the power of the explosion was beyond everyone's imagination. It was even more terrifying than the wind tribulation that descended when hundreds of people underwent their tribulations at the same time. Under such a powerful explosion, there are almost no blind spots inside the Demon Sealing Formation. Whether it was the elders of the Taishaman who were fighting or sect leader Li who had not made a move before, including Yang Chen's family, no one could escape. After the explosion, there was no other movement, and the inside of the Demon Sealing Formation instantly quietened down. More and more dust flew in the air, covering the sky tightly. After a long time, it slowly floated down to the ground, revealing the bright and clear sky. Inside the original Demon Seal array, after the battle between Yang Chun and a group of great elders, plus the previous battle of more than 30 masters of the Deshang stage, it had become a scene of devastation and potholes. However, after this explosion, the ground dozens of feet below the ground was completely turned into dust. Not a single piece of rock remained. The 30 or so experts who were fighting could not be seen at all. Not even a trace of their existence was left. The silent silence lasted for at least 2 hours. The Demon Seal array was calm, and there was not even the slightest wind. Even if it has become the finest powder, the dust on the ground did not rise at all, as if the entire Demon Seal array had become a dead zone. Finally, the calm situation was broken, and in a corner of the Demon Seal array, a figure slowly appeared. When it first appeared, it was still an illusory shadow. After a while, it gradually became a solid entity. Looking at the figure and appearance, it was the sect leader Li of the Taishaman. A burst of spiritual awareness that was so solid that it was almost like a substance was sent out from sect leader Li. The entire Demon Seal array was scanned, and there was no shadow of any living creature. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief, and then he let out a burst of wild laughter. Ha ha ha! The wild laughter of sect leader Li echoed in the Demon Seal array. The sound shook the field, and the dust on the ground was shaken. After a long time, sect leader Li's wild laughter stopped, and he looked around coldly. Humph, Master Yang. Do you think you can escape the power of my Taishaman's sky-blasting thunder by relying on some despicable means to deal with the Great Elder? Sect leader Li has been depressed since the beginning of Li Liheng's accident, and now he finally spit out that resentment. Although the elders he brought with him have been killed or injured, this also means that he has become the most authoritative one among the remaining Taishamen, and no one can shake his position. The elders who escaped with sect leader Li, although they seem to respect sect leader Li, will inevitably have some complaints about him because the Taishamen were besieged and destroyed. Maybe they will replace sect leader Li's position after settling down. This time, whether it is the enemy or his own people, the threat has all disappeared. The sky-blasting thunder that was used just now was refined by dozens of Taishaman's predecessors after the tribulation and before the ascension with a real human immortal level refining techniques. With the blessing of dozens of masters, the power has been unimaginable, at least reaching the attack power of the 9th grade of human immortal. In particular, sect leader Li took advantage of a group of masters to secretly put the sky-blasting thunder not far from Yang Chun. No matter how powerful Yang Chun was, it was impossible for him to escape under this kind of attack. Under the sky-blasting thunder, it was believed that there was no one alive in the Demon Seal array except sect leader Li. Even sect leader Li himself relied on a super protective magic weapon passed down by the ancestors of Taishaman, not only to hide his figure, but also to protect himself. The real backup force of Taishaman was actually in the hands of sect leader Li. This kind of major event related to the survival of the sect. Sect leader Li would not hand it over to others in any case. This was the last trick of sect leader Li to cross the sea by deceiving everyone. Now it seems that it was very successful. Whether it was the enemy or the possible opponents within his own people, they have all disappeared under the arrangement of sect leader Li. From now on, Taishaman will stand again in the world in a different way. Dare to destroy my Taishaman. You wait for my talented younger generation of Taishaman to grow up, then I will find you one by one to settle the accounts. The enemy in front of him disappeared without a trace. Sect leader Li began to gnash his teeth and make such a voice to himself, and his eyes also shot a firm gaze. Just when sect leader Li was proud, a sudden change occurred. Chapter 1430. Just behind sect master Li, a bright saber light suddenly flashed and swept straight through sect master Li's waist. In the flickering of the knife light, the blade of the immortal beheading saber had already moved from the right side of sect master Li to the left side of sect master Li. Sect master Li stood in place. His body and expression did not change, but his voice suddenly quieted down. Then, sect master Li's face showed a shocked expression, quietly looked down at his body, slowly raised his head, and saw Yang Chun and Gao Gong Sunling who were already standing opposite him. Yang Chun and the other two did not have the slightest embarrassment on their bodies, and there was no difference from when they first appeared. They were spotless, and the smoke and dust that had just filled the sky had no effect on the three of them. Standing opposite sect master Li, Yang Chen's immortal beheading saber had been put away. Looking at sect master Li, who was like a clay doll, Yang Chun said in a loud voice, "Every injustice has its perpetrator. Every debt has its debtor. Sect master Li, you were killed by me, and I will take this cause and effect." Sect master Li was surprised to see Yang Chun and Gao Gong Sunling appear, as if he was looking at something incredible, and his eyes were as big as copper bells. After listening to Yang Chen's words, he let out a roar that seemed to be squeezed out. How is it possible? As soon as he spoke, his body shook involuntarily, and the upper body of sect master Li suddenly fell back. Until this moment, the upper and lower halves of sect master Li's body gurgled with blood, instantly turning the surrounding land into a bloody mud. Just now, Yang Chen's knife had already cut sect master Li in half, but because Yang Chen's knife was too fast, sect master Li could still maintain his original posture. Now that he said the shock in his heart, his anger was deflated, and there was nothing he could do. Even if he fell to the ground, at the moment when his soul flew away, sect master Li's eyes were still wide open and never closed again. Just now the sneaky little movements of sect master Li. How could Yang Chun, who has been monitoring sect master Li, not notice it, even if sect master Li also has some magic weapons that can shield most of the spiritual awareness of the mortal world? But in front of Yang Chun, it is still not enough. Not to mention Yang Chun, even Gao Yu and Gong Sunling couldn't hide it. How could a magic treasure refined by a human immortal level expert surpass Yang Chen's divine sense? After discovering sect master Li's sneak attack, Yang Chun and Gao Gong Sunling did not do anything to stop it. The extermination of the Taishaman's clan was a major event, especially the mastermind behind the scenes. It must not be known to any outsider. As long as they were Taishaman who had seen Yang Chun before, as long as they weren't fools, they would be able to figure out with their toes that something must have gone wrong with the demon ceiling formation. The provider of the demon ceiling formation was Yang Chun, so the extermination of the Taishaman must have something to do with Yang Chun. If it was in the immortal world, Yang Chun would of course be responsible for what he did, but now it was in the mortal world. As long as anyone in the profound heaven sect, in the spiritual world, and the immortal world knew that Yang Chun was the main accomplice of the extermination of the Taishaman, not to mention the current Yang Chun, even if Yang Chun was 10 times stronger, Yang Chun would not be able to withstand a few pinky fingers of the master. Because of this, as long as outsiders knew that Yang Chun appeared here, they must die. Whether it was the Taishaman who fled here with sect master Li, or Hu Qianyi and Ming Guanrao who had been captured by Gong Sunling. These former Taishamen must all die and must not be left alive. This was the main purpose of Gong Sunling using those people to launch an attack without fear of death in the previous battle. It was best to kill the elders of the Taishamen, but if they couldn't be killed, they had to die in the battle, leaving no future trouble. Unexpectedly, Sect Master Li's super sky-piercing thunder solved all the troubles. The masters he brought out and the masters controlled by Gong Sunling, under the attack of the sky-piercing thunder, all of them died, saving Yang Chun a lot of trouble. With such a powerful magic weapon, why didn't Sect Master Li use the sky-piercing thunder before the extermination of the Taishamen? This couldn't be blamed on Sect Master Li for being stingy. The real attack range of this sky-piercing thunder was only a few hundred miles. In this demon ceiling formation, it was the best means of attack. When the masters of the world besieged the Taishamen before, it was a big scene of tens of thousands of miles. A super sky-piercing thunder would never be able to kill a few masters. Sect Master Li couldn't believe it until he died. Yang Chun and Gao Yu Gong Sunling were unscathed under his sky-piercing thunder attack. He couldn't even believe that Yang Chun and the other two could be detected by his spiritual awareness under the enhancement of the magic weapon refined by the masters. He clearly borrowed the spiritual awareness of the human immortal level and did not find anyone's trace at the time. Unexpectedly, Yang Chun stabbed him in the back. This knife made Sect Master Li die with a grievance. The dignified Sect Master of the Taishamen would die under the despicable backstab. How could the proud Sect Master Li accept it? However, Sect Master Li never thought that his previous blow was also a sneak attack that he himself despised in any case. Giving him a taste of his own medicine, this was Yang Chen's attitude towards Sect Master Li. Since Sect Master Li did not choose a dignified battle, then Yang Chun would not give Sect Master Li a dignified death. Of course, this attitude was only chosen when Yang Chun was confident of winning. In the face of a powerful enemy, Yang Chun would definitely use the most effective method, even if it was a sneak attack. When Sect Master Li's sky-piercing thunder was launched, Yang Chen's golden bell and Gong Sunling's mountain river geographical map played a role at the same time, firmly protecting the three people under two layers of defense. If it was before the destruction of the Taishamen, Yang Chun was not sure whether the golden bell could take the attack of this sky-piercing thunder. But the special formation Eye of the Heaven and Earth Infinite Essence Suppression formation here had absorbed half of the spiritual power in the world for 40 days. Yang Chun had absolute certainty. The golden bell finally lit up the fourth dragon shadow, which also meant that the defense of the golden bell had been improved again. It must be known that in these 40 days, the golden bell and other magic weapons had absorbed half of the spiritual power in the world. Even with the golden bell's big appetite for spiritual power, it was completely satisfied. Coupled with the mountain river geographical map that had been strengthened by the dragon body and also absorbed a huge amount of spiritual power, not to mention the sky-piercing thunder made by dozens of human immortal masters. Even if it was an earth immortal level sky-piercing thunder, it was estimated that it would be helpless against the abnormal defense of these two things. After resisting the attack, the three people naturally hid under the cover of the sea-pouring jasper cup. The sea-pouring jasper cup, which had also absorbed a huge amount of spiritual power, exerted a strong function of shielding spiritual awareness, and firmly blocked the exploration of the human immortal level spiritual awareness that was enhanced by Sect Master Li with the help of the magic weapon. At the same time, the sea-pouring jasper cup was also the biggest contributor to Yang Chen's plot. Chapter 1431. Now, the remnants of the Taishamen who fled here were finally dead, and there was no one left. Even the masters of the Taishamen had all disappeared together. Except for Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, no one else knew that Yang Chun was closely related to the annihilation of the Taishamen. However, this was only a superficial phenomenon. If Yang Chun felt safe because of this, then it would be a big mistake. It must be known that whether it was Sect Master Li or the Elder who claimed to be in charge of the inheritance of the sect, they all carried Immortal's cave magic weapons, and each of them had carefully selected reserved disciples of the Taishamen in it. although they did not directly participate in this battle. Who knew if Sect Master Li and the Elder had leaked their news to the Taishaman disciples and the Immortal's cave magic weapon when they finally found out that something was wrong? It must be known that as the controller of the Immortal's cave magic weapon, if he really wanted to inform the Masters in the Immortal's cave, he could do it with just a thought. Therefore, Yang Chun and Gao Yu and Gong Sunling couldn't relax yet. All of this needed to be handled by them. The first thing to do was to find all the magic weapons in this demon ceiling formation, and then check them one by one. Finding the magic weapons was not difficult for Gong Sunling, who had the Mountain River geographical map. All the masters could be said to have been annihilated, leaving only the body of Sect Master Li, who was cut in half. Under the attack of the sky-blasting thunder, most of the magic weapons that were not strong enough have been turned into powder. The few that really remained, each of them was a rare treasure. Gong Sunling took Gao Yu and happily looked for the magic weapons that were scattered in all directions by the sky-blasting thunder, while Yang Chun specifically looked for them on the body of Sect Master Li. Almost all the magic weapons on Sect Master Li's body were well preserved, which was one of the reasons why Yang Chun chose to kill Sect Master Li with a knife, so that he would not jump over the wall and casually control a few powerful magic weapons to explode, which could also cause Yang Chun a lot of losses. In Yang Chun's mind, the good things on Sect Master Li's body had already been surnamed Yang since he entered the demon ceiling formation. Unsurprisingly, Yang Chun easily found 4 Immortal's cave magic weapons from the Cosmos Belt on Sect Master Li. In each Immortal's cave, there were tens of thousands of Taishaman disciples who were cultivating. Yang Chun first used Shao Tian to swallow the aura of Sect Master Li on the Immortal's cave magic weapon, and quickly made his own spiritual awareness imprint. The first thing after finishing was to restrict the access of the Taishaman disciples in these Immortal's caves. Under the control of Yang Chun's powerful spiritual awareness, he believed that no one could come out of the Immortal's cave magic weapon. It was equivalent to more than 40,000 Taishaman reserve disciples had been trapped in these Immortal's caves by Yang Chun. It had to be said that as the sect master of the Taishaman sect, Sect Master Li really had a lot of good things on him. Not to mention, the crown that could change its shape was enough to protect the blow of the sky-blasting thunder, and at the same time, it could also shield the spiritual awareness very strongly. Thinking about it, not long ago, Sect Master Li relied on this crown to remain unscathed under the attacks of the heaven-shaking thunder, which did not distinguish between friend and foe. Gao Yu already had the dragon-horned double-flying sword as her life-source magic weapon, the puppet made of the corpse of the second city master as a means of transportation, and the Emperor's aura, but she still lacked a powerful protective magic weapon. This crown was just right. The crown itself had a transformation function. As long as Gao Yu controlled it to change into another shape and let Shao Tian swallow the aura of all the refiners, who could recognize that this was the magic weapon of Taishaman. A hairpin that could increase the spiritual awareness for a short period of time could make the user's spiritual awareness reach the level of the second-grade human immortal in a short period of time. This basically meant nothing to Yang Chun, Gao Yu, and Gong Sunling, but after changing its appearance, it was still a good thing in the Chunyang Palace. Other various resources and magic weapons could almost be described as innumerable. It may be that Sect Master Li was aware of the great danger this time in advance. So Sect Master Li almost emptied the warehouse of the Taishaman. At least most of the Taishaman's treasures were on Sect Master Li. The masters of the major sect that besieged the Taishaman would soon discover that although they did not spend much effort to eliminate the Taishaman and occupy the territory of the Taishaman, they did not get much benefit. In addition to eliminating the Taishaman, the most powerful enemy or competitor, there were basically no material benefits. The only thing the masters of the major sect could do was to hope that the series of heavenly tribulations did not destroy too many things. The magic weapons of the hundreds of thousands of Taishaman disciples who died may make up for their fear for more than a month, but the real secret treasures of the Taishaman, whether it was the capital accumulated by the Taishaman for a comeback or the good things in the warehouse of the Taishaman, basically fell into the hands of Yang Chun and Gao Yu Gong Sunling. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling did not search for a long time, and soon returned to Yang Chen's side happily. Gong Sunling handed a miniature mountain to Yang Chen as if she was asking for credit. "My husband, I found a magic treasure of an immortal's cave, and there are many Taishaman disciples in it. All the magic treasures of the immortal's cave contain the hope of the Taishaman in the future." Basically, they were mainly in the Yuanying stage and below, and all of them were talented cultivators. It was a pity that these people met Yang Chen, Gao Yu, and Gong Sunling. The cultivation of the Deshang stage suppressed them, and they were unable to resist at all. As they could be used to contain the hope of the Taishaman in the future, these 5 magic treasures of the Immortal's Cave were very strong. Even under the attack of the thunder, the miniature mountain did not collapse, but was slightly damaged. As long as it was slightly refined and supplemented, it would be another rare magic treasure of the Immortal's Cave. "My husband, what should we do with these people?" Gao Yu understood the seriousness of the matter. Every living Taishaman disciple in these Immortals' Caves was a threat enough to destroy their family of 3 and even the entire Chunyang Palace. As long as one person leaked the news that the 3 of them were here, what awaited Yang Chen's family, and even the entire Chunyang Palace, was a disaster. Perhaps there would not be too much threat in the mortal world, but as long as they ascended to the spiritual world, they would definitely be killed by the people of the Xintian sect. After the masters of the Deshang stage in the mortal world ascended, even if they were as strong as Yang Chen, they were just the lowest small fish in the spiritual world. Those real masters might be able to kill them dozens of times with a sneeze. In fact, Gao Yu did not need to ask to know that there was only one ending for those Taishaman disciples, and that was complete death. However, could their husband kill tens of thousands of people at a time? Chapter 1432. Let me deal with it. You don't have to worry about it. Yang Chen took the magic weapon of the Immortal's Cave handed over by Gong Sunling and carefully explored it. After letting Xiao Tian swallow the aura of the original owner, together with the 4 magic weapons of the Immortal's Cave in his own hands, they were all sent to Gong Sunling's hands. "Husband," Gong Sunling asked in confusion, "why did Yang Chen give these things to her?" Not only Gong Sunling, but even Gao Yu had the same doubts. Use the Mountain River geographical map to integrate and refine these space magic weapons. Yang Chen explained with a smile. As for those people inside, all of them will faint, and after searching, put them in my medicine garden for me to take away. The 5 magic weapons of the Immortal's Cave were almost the strongest spatial magic weapons in the mortal world. Integrated into the Mountain River geographical map, it could more effectively increase the power of the Mountain River geographical map. Now that Gong Sunling was a master of the Deshang stage, the Mountain River geographical map, which was originally unable to further sacrificial refine, could now be integrated with these space magic weapons to improve its power. For Yang Chen's instructions, Gong Sunling would never have any discount in the implementation and immediately followed her husband's instructions. As long as these Immortals' Caves entered the Mountain River geographical map, then the people inside could almost be said to have no control over their own life and death. If Gong Sunling wanted them to faint, they would never wake up. Even the masters of the Deshang stage could not resist, let alone these future genius disciples below the Yuanying stage. To be selected as a reserve disciple by the Taishaman, the cultivation aptitude was a selection criterion, but more importantly, the loyalty of these people to the Taishaman was absolutely credible. It was based on this that Yang Chen never had the intention to recruit these people. Moreover, it was simply unrealistic to recruit tens of thousands of people. As long as one person, they could put Yang Chen's family and Chunyang Palace into a disaster. How to deal with these 50,000 Taishaman disciples? Yang Chen was actually a little hesitant at the beginning. Although it was one thing to kill Sect Master Li and those elders in front of him, it was another thing to silently kill 50,000 people. However, after calculating the days, Yang Chen suddenly made a decision. He already had an idea of how to deal with the 50,000 people, so he didn't have to worry about it anymore. Even so, Yang Chen was still unwilling to let Gao Yu and Gong Sunling know. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling were also smart and didn't ask much. Anyway, their husband would never harm them. This was enough. Not to mention the life and death of 50,000 people. Even if it was 500,000 people, so what? Gong Sunling was very happy to refine the cave abodes. With the experience of refining the Langya well, refining these 5 cave abodes, which were countless times smaller than the space of the Langya well, was very easy. It didn't take long for her to finish refining them. Those Taishaman disciples all fainted and then waited for Gong Sunling to plunder their belongings one by one. For the time being, they were placed in the mountain river geographical map and waited for Yangchun to ask for them at any time. Husband, the traces here are too obvious. What should we do? Gong Sunling was busy refining the space, but Gao Yu talked to Yangchun about something else. In this area covered by the demon ceiling formation, there was originally a demon ceiling formation inside, but it was forcibly broken by Yangchun. In addition, there were so many great elders fighting, and finally, it was hit by Sect Master Li's heaven-blasting thunder. It had already become a scene of devastation. As long as someone came here, they could see what had happened here. Even Sect Master Li had fled here. The Taishaman seemed to have been exterminated, but it was impossible for them to be completely exterminated. There were hundreds of thousands of Taishaman disciples, and there were always people who went out to gain experience. There were many people who did not rush back to Taishaman after getting the news, so the news of the Taishaman being exterminated could not be hidden from the mysterious Heaven Sect. It was just a matter of time. Once someone knew about this place and came to investigate, the situation here would inevitably be exposed. Although the traces of fighting could not explain anything, if someone wanted to have a relationship with the demon ceiling formation, Yangchun would not be able to escape the suspicion and pursuit of the mysterious Heaven Sect. Yangchun was a person who had been reborn, so he naturally did things without any loopholes. When Gao Yu asked about this matter, Yangchun almost thought of a solution in the blink of an eye. It's simple. Just remove the demon ceiling formation, and then someone will cross the wind tribulation here. Yangchun answered Gao Yu with a smile. As long as someone crossed the tribulation here, it would be contaminated with the aura of the wind tribulation. All the environment would be destroyed, so naturally, no one would suspect anything. This was the place where the great elders of the Taishaman secluded themselves. So what if there were a few people crossing the tribulation? Those elders later found that they could not do anything, so it did not seem unusual for them to choose to cross the tribulation. There is a way, but where can I find someone to cross the tribulation? Gao Yu recognized Yangchun's method, but this method immediately brought a new problem. Those who crossed the tribulation would definitely find that there was something abnormal here. Was it necessary to find a trustworthy master of the Chunyang Palace and forcibly use the 100-year pill to improve their cultivation and forcibly cross the tribulation? There is no need to be so troublesome. There is someone crossing the tribulation in front of us. Yangchun smiled and took out his pure bottle medicine garden. When Gao Yu saw the pure bottle medicine garden, she suddenly understood. The pure bottle medicine garden had absorbed spiritual power for 40 days in the special Eye of the Universe, everlasting spirit suppression formation. In these 40 days, half of the spiritual power in the world had been cleansed. It could almost be said that it had been completely sacrificial refined several times, and the quality had improved by more than a little. Among them, the greatest benefits were the tool spirits of the medicine garden, a Zhu and a Bai. The spiritual power that the medicine garden could carry was limited, so most of the spiritual power was absorbed by a Zhu and a Bai. If a Zhu and a Bai did not have a stronger ability to absorb more spiritual power before, but after the integration of the Immortal Peach and the Blood Phantom Vine, the bodies of the two women were close to the edge of the tribulation at any time. Their own strength brought about more absorption of spiritual power. Even without Yangchen's hands, they controlled the medicine garden and forcibly sacrificially improved the medicine garden by a few levels in the scouring of spiritual power. After absorbing so much spiritual power, they now completely exceeded the strength of the tribulation. It was only because of the protection of the demon seal formation that the tribulation did not fall. Now at this time, it was time for a Zhu and a Bai to cross the tribulation. The two tool spirits crossed the tribulation at the same time. The wind tribulation would be twice as strong as the ordinary tribulation. The power of the tribulation could completely cover this area and completely turn this area into a place where the tribulation raged. Even if more people came to investigate, they could only come to one conclusion at that time. Someone here was just crossing the tribulation and ascending. There would be no other possibility. Azhua, Bai, it's time for you to cross the tribulation. Yang Chun summoned a Zhu and a Bai and explained the reason why he wanted them to cross the tribulation at this time. He did not forget to give the two women great benefits. After the tribulation is successful, I will give you the gourd of the dragon clan and let you refine it. Chapter 1433. The dragon gourd was obtained by Yang Chun from the treasure house of the Dragon Palace. It could contain almost all the liquids in the world, including all kinds of spiritual solutions, and even the black liquid of the ultimate demonized vine. It was definitely a powerful magic weapon refined by the Dragon Clan. A Zhu and a Bai knew about this gourd. When they heard Yang Chen's words, the two women were pleasantly surprised. If they could really integrate and refine the dragon gourd, then the bottleneck of the original medicine garden's limited capacity of spiritual power would completely disappear. The dragon gourd could contain almost unlimited spiritual power. At that time, it would be enough for all the medicinal herbs in the medicine garden to not worry about the lack of spiritual power for thousands of years. Their own strength had already reached the realm of crossing their tribulation. And with the stimulation of Yang Chen's reward and the experience of watching the dragon spirit's tribulation last time, the two women were now eager to try. Gong Sunling did not delay time, and soon the outermost demon seal array was withdrawn into the mountain river geographical map. The next moment, a Zhu and a Bai flew into the air with the medicine garden's body, just in the center of this hundreds of miles area. The universe everlasting spirit suppressing formation was definitely a powerful formation, especially after being edified in the special formation eye. It was even more incredible. Yang Lan and Yang Lan were able to reach the realm of absolute strength tribulation in just a few dozen days. They didn't have to consider anything like the state of mind at all, and they could resist the heavenly tribulation. Even Yang Lan of the Yuanying stage and Yang Lan of the Jedan stage could be forcibly promoted to this realm, not to mention a Zhu and a Bai who were already on the verge of crossing their tribulation. Even if the many magic weapons shared half of the spiritual power in the world, it was enough for a Zhu and a Bai to completely ignore the ordinary wind tribulation by relying on that. Even if their own strength was strong, the heavenly tribulation would be several times stronger, and at the same time, the tribulation would strengthen the power of the heavenly tribulation. At this time, a Zhu and a Bai were not worried about failing the tribulation at all. This was the effect of confidence. The same principle had appeared with Wang Yong in the past. Now Yang Chun used another way to tell the two women that he was optimistic about them by giving the dragon gourd to them. The two women had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. How could they not understand it? A Zhu and a Bai, as the tool spirits, knew what it meant to be favored by Yang Chun. Under the dual stimulation of strong confidence and strength, the two women even burst out with unprecedented passion. Originally, Yang Chun still had some encouragement and excitement, but when the first wind tribulation fell, Yang Chun could already be completely sure that a Zhu and a Bai would have no problem passing the wind tribulation. This was the second time for Gao Yu and Gong Sunling to see the artifact spirit's tribulation, and they couldn't help but feel envious. However, this kind of thing was fate and could not be forced. It was not easy to find a creature that was willing to be an artifact spirit. In addition, it was indeed difficult to find an artifact spirit that was worthy of the two women's life-bonded magic treasures. They did not have Yang Chen's heaven-defying luck to be able to find a Zhu and a Bai first, and then find a dragon spirit. Whether it was the tribulation of an expert or a weapon spirit, it was a rare experience for the three of them, especially a wind tribulation of this scale. Apart from the time when Tao Junki crossed her tribulation, the one they had seen was the most powerful one. Of course, the scene of Taishiman's Yang Lan and Yanglan, pulling more than a dozen great elders into the tribulation at the same time, was impossible for them to see. This time, it was a little compensation. This was the thought in Yang Chen's heart. If the masters of the major sect who besieged Teshima knew about it, they would definitely spit out a mouthful of old blood. Was this just a little compensation? It must be known that the reserve materials of the entire Teshima, the capital that Teshima prepared for a comeback in case of an emergency, all fell into the hands of Yang Chun and his wife. Coupled with the family property that Sect Masterly brought out this time, it could be said that more than 70% of the wealth of Teshima had fallen into the hands of Yang Chun and Gao Yugong Sunling. The major sect worked hard, and in the end, they only got 30% of the benefits, and there were so many sects to share, among which there was a share of Teshima. At the same time, they also had to compensate Yang Chen's wives and concubines for paying the pure true fourth fire god Thunder. It could fall into the hands of every sect. It could be said that it was extremely shameful. Yang Chun and Gao Yugong Sunling got great benefits, but they also said that they had barely received some compensation. This kind of mentality was really a bit unkind. However, who knew? Even if it was the head of the palace, it was impossible to know this. It was even more impossible to know that before Yang Chun joined the Chunyang Palace, he had already made up his mind to destroy the Teshima. A Zhu and a Bai did not let Yang Chun and the others wait for long. The 9 wind tribulations came one after another, and they did not show any tricks. They just methodically dealt with the tribulations step by step. In addition to the aura of the tribulations that enveloped thousands of miles, giving the area originally covered by the demon seal array a solid imprint of the scene after the tribulations, the overall process was calm and peaceful. When a Zhu and a Bai appeared in front of Yang Chun again with a smile like a flower, Yang Chun just smiled and said congratulations, and then put the Dragon Clan's gourd in the pure bottle medicine garden. This was the reward promised to the 2 women. As for how the 2 women refined and integrated it, it was the 2 women's own business. In terms of cultivation alone, the 2 women had surpassed Yang Chun, but because they were tool spirits, they could not take the initiative to ascend and could only stay with Yang Chun. There's plenty of time to refine and integrate. Let's pick up the people first. Yang Chun did not let a Zhu and a Bai start refining and integrating immediately, but first let Gong Sunling send 50,000 Teshima disciples into the medicine garden. With a Bai there, the body of the demonized blue jade blood phantom vine could definitely make those people fall into a coma forever and never wake up again. After doing all this, the 3 did not stay here for a moment. Yang Chun directly brought the 2 women into the shuttle and quickly flew in the direction of the Chunyang Palace. The harvest this time, no one can say anything. It's good to make a fortune quietly. Yang Chun once again told Gao Yu and Gong Sunling those things, if they could be used, then use them. If they can't be used, find a way to change their appearance in the future and slowly sell them. We have hundreds of years to do this slowly. There is no hurry. Both women nodded with a smile on their faces. The harvest was good, but what really made them happy was that they shared a secret with their husband. This secret was unknown to the other sisters, and it was their husband who specifically told no one to say it. This feeling of sharing a secret with their husband was what they cared about the most. Ignoring the happiness of the 2 women, Yang Chen's mind had already flown to another place. That person should already be born. These 50,000 people were just enough for him to end his karma. Chapter 1434. The masters of the major sect had gathered at the original site of the Teshima to carry out the final cleanup work. The entire Teshima Mountain Gate was no longer as prosperous as it used to be. Instead, it was in ruins. After 3 consecutive heavenly tribulations, Super Thunder Tribulation, Super Fire Tribulation, and Super Wind Tribulation, the masters besieging them didn't even need to make a move. The Teshima, who had unlocked the demon sealing formation, had become lambs waiting to be slaughtered. No one had expected such an outcome, but everyone was exceptionally glad that it was such an outcome. The Teshima were the unlucky ones. They were everyone's enemies, so this was the best result. If the same misfortune had befallen the allied forces of the major sect, Everyone felt a chill just thinking about it. Fortunately, the tragedy had befallen the Taishaman. Not only had the Taishaman Mountain Gate been directly destroyed, but the masters who had come to encircle the Taishaman had not been stained with the blood of the Taishaman. The people from a small sect were not clear about this, but the people from a major sect all knew that the heavenly court had changed. The mysterious heaven sect was now in charge. Even if the Taishaman had angered the public this time and been destroyed, the mysterious heaven sect had nothing to say. The problem was that the mysterious heaven sect would find other reasons to deal with the masters who had participated one by one. Once they were targeted by the masters of the mysterious heaven sect, it could be said that their future path of cultivation would be extremely dangerous. Now, everyone had not been stained with the blood of the Taishaman. Even if they ascended to the spiritual realm or the celestial realm, they did not have to worry too much about the mysterious heaven sect's investigation. After all, even if the mysterious heaven sect was 10 times stronger, it was impossible for them to become the enemy of all the sect in the world. The current situation was just right. Everyone had not been stained with too much blood. The Taishaman had been destroyed by the Taishaman themselves. Everyone had just come to reason with the Taishaman. No matter how strong the mysterious heaven sect was, they couldn't just let others reason with them, right? Therefore, the experts of the major sect could plunder the Taishaman's original territory without any qualms. While they were looking for the fish that escaped the net, they were also collecting the spoils of war. Fortunately, everyone knew that it would be very troublesome to face the behemoth that was the mysterious heaven sect in the future. Thus, everyone restrained themselves when searching for the spoils of war and didn't fight. Under the coordination of several large sects of the Tao, Devil, Monster, and Rogue Cultivators Alliance, there wasn't any big trouble and everything seemed to be in order. No one had expected that the colossal Taishaman would fall so quickly and so thoroughly. Although it was still uncertain how many Taishaman were still outside and how many of them had escaped this time, everyone was certain that the Taishaman were finished. They would never have a chance to make a comeback. It wasn't that the Taishaman didn't have a backup plan, but all the sect wouldn't allow the Taishaman to rise again. This time, the Taishaman could be said to be the public enemy of the world. No sect would allow such a tragedy to happen again. That terrifying array directly absorbed the spirit energy of the world for the sect to use. For the past 40 days, the experts of the major sect had watched the spirit energy of the world gather in the Taishaman, but they couldn't do anything about it. This kind of situation couldn't happen again. The destruction of the Taishaman was already a fact. Next, it was time for everyone to sit down and eat the spoils. The resources left by the greatest heaven sect and the territory left would be divided according to how much effort they made this time under the auspices of several major sections. Very few people argued about this. This was something left behind by the Taishaman. Whoever took the most would have to bear the wrath of the mysterious heaven sect in the spiritual realm in the future. In addition to the super big sect, some of the experts from the small sect who participated even said that they only needed some simple spirit stones, elixirs, and materials. The ones who really dared to reach out were the big sect that could already wrestle with the Taishaman. This was simple. The Taishaman's territory was in the Tao sect, so it was obviously impossible for the Devil sect and the Devil sect to accept it. This directly benefited the 4 big Tao sect. They weren't afraid that the mysterious heaven sect would settle the score later and directly divide the territory in the spirit veins. The big Tao sect occupied the territory, so they didn't have a share of the wealth. The resources of the Taishaman were distributed to the Devil sect and the Devil sect. Although it was more difficult for them to cultivate directly in the past, the cultivation methods in the world were all comprehensible, especially the orthodox cultivation methods of the greatest heaven sect. No matter who it was a useful reference. As for the various elixir recipes and array formations, there were definitely good things that could be collected by the Taishaman. They could be used anywhere, so no one would refuse them. As for the various medicinal herbs and refining materials, no one would dislike them. The more, the better. The Devil sect and the Devil sect didn't stand on ceremony. Each of the Taishaman's sutra depository made a copy. The Devil sect and the Devil sect each took 1/3 of the items in the warehouse. The remaining 1/3 was distributed to the experts from the small sect who contributed. The Taishaman was indeed worthy of being the #1 sect in the world. All kinds of magic treasures, elixirs, and spirit stones that they didn't have time to take away were piled up like a small mountain. Every expert who participated in this matter didn't fall behind. Everyone had a share, and almost everyone is satisfied. Almost all the cultivators in the world were running around telling each other, drinking and celebrating this great news that made everyone happy. Even the low-level cultivators who weren't qualified to participate were the same. The heaven and earth boundless original suppression formation didn't just affect the experts, but all the cultivators. While they were dividing the loot, there was another thing that needed to be done immediately, and that was to deal with the small sect that originally attached themselves to the Taishaman. To put it bluntly, these small sect attached themselves to the Taishaman were the dogs and hawks of the Taishaman. Usually, they relied on the support of the Taishaman to act like tyrants. Even some of the dirty work that the Taishaman couldn't do was done by these small sect. With the Taishaman supporting these sect from behind, countless cultivators who had suffered losses didn't dare to say anything. Now that the Taishaman had been exterminated, the previous debts had to be properly settled. Since the Taishaman had been exterminated, these dogs and hawks naturally couldn't be left alive. Whether it was to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, or to take revenge, it would be another round of killing. Naturally, the resources of these sect would also belong to whoever did it, and no one would fight for it. In the world of cultivators, there were countless rewards for the disciples of the Taishaman. No matter who it was, as long as they found a disciple of the Taishaman who escaped the net, they could bring their heads to the big sect to receive the reward without any reason. Killing without teaching? When the Taishaman used the heaven and earth boundless original suppression formation, they didn't inform everyone. What everyone did was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Chapter 1435. In this storm, the Pure Yang Palace did not stand out in particular. It was average. Apart from blocking a few Tribulation Transcendence Masters in a certain direction, there was almost nothing else that could be praised. Shi Shan Shan, Sun Qingxue, Shi Wu Shuang, and the Murong sisters all fought with their respective sect. In addition to contributing the fourth fire Divine Thunder, they also killed some masters. On the contrary, Yang Chun, Gao Yu, and Gong Sunling did not appear at all, let alone make any contributions. This made Yang Chen's wives and concubines feel very strange. When Yang Chun separated, he also told them to follow the pace of their respective sect masters, but he did not appear with Chunyang Palace. It was really unreasonable. However, there is absolutely no doubt that their husband must have taken advantage of them in other places. What was distributed to Chunyang Palace was a large number of spirit stones and 100,000 volumes of ancient books of Taishaman. The ancient books of the Taishaman Sutra Depository could not be distributed to all sect without limit. After being divided by the big sect, the order was completely disrupted, and the people of the small sect could draw whatever they wanted. No one was dissatisfied. Since they did not have the strength to bear the anger of Xintian's sect, they should not do anything to further anger Xintian's sect. It was already a blessing to get these ancient books, and no one would ask for more. Even if they were greedy people, they would have a sense of propriety in this matter. If they were too greedy, not to mention facing Xintian's sect in the spiritual world, these big sect in the mortal world would not let them have an easy time. For the people of Chunyang Palace, as long as the Taishaman were destroyed, it was already the biggest gain. The hatred of the Taishaman against Chunyang Palace could be said to have been cleanly avenged. There was nothing that made the palace master and the core executives happier than this. As for these things that were distributed, it was completely an extra surprise. Another pleasant surprise was that everyone realized that after the heaven and earth limitless origin suppressing formation stopped operating, the spiritual power in the world began to slowly return to normal. It was not forcefully plundered to Taishaman. This allowed everyone's hearts to calm down. As long as they could return to normal, everything would be fine. Naturally, the heaven and earth limitless original suppressing formation was also found in the Sutras Depository by the disciples of the sect. This array diagram was the original one that Yang Chun had given him back then, and it did not have any special array eyes or anything like that. The formation experts of each sect studied it and combined it with the situation in Teshiment, and they understood the function of this formation. What bullsh asterisk T? It can't be stopped after it's activated. What misunderstanding? The explanation that the Teshiment gave to the representatives of the major sect in the past was pure bullsh asterisk T. According to the results of the research, the Teshiment just didn't want to stop. How could they not stop? This was another crime of the Teshiment, not to mention the spiritual realm. Even if they were in the celestial realm, the Black Heaven sect would not be able to reason with them. This kind of formation was definitely not something that people in the mortal world could study. Even if they went to the spiritual realm in the future, they would still have a score to settle with the Black Heaven sect. With this, the major sects would be able to hold their heads up even straighter. After everyone stayed at the mountain gate of Teshiment for a few months, the experts of each sect began to return one after another. They went back to their own homes to count their gains. Only the people of the four major Tao sect were left here. After dividing up the territory of Teshiment, they would naturally establish their own branches and assign people. It should be known that the Teshiment had always occupied the most abundant spiritual veins and the most suitable treasured land for cultivation. Even if it was divided equally among the four sects, it was still an unexpected surprise for the four major sect. The insufferably arrogant Teshiment fell just like that. The scattered disciples were hunted down like crazy, just like how Yangchun was hunted in his previous life. The difference was that these Teshiment disciples had no place to hide no matter where they went. Unlike Yangchun, who could at least escape to a place where the Teshiment couldn't reach and continue to cultivate. It could be said that this event in the Greatest Heaven sect could definitely be said to be the biggest event in the world of cultivators in the past 10,000 years. The impact of this matter was not something that could be completely eliminated in 1,000 years. Perhaps it would take around 10,000 years before it would truly cease to exist. All the cultivators were intentionally or unintentionally looking for the whereabouts of the Teshiment. Everyone knew that it was impossible for such a big sect like the Teshiment to not have a backup plan. Once they found a secret place to recuperate, they would slowly grow in the future and become a huge threat to all the other sect. No one was willing to bear the revenge of the Teshiment in the dark, and no one was willing to face it. To the surprise of all the major sect, only a dozen of the great elders of the Teshiment appeared. The rest of them were nowhere to be seen. Logically speaking, the existence of these great elders was to protect the continuation of the sect. Why did they not appear when the Teshiment were in a situation where the entire sect was destroyed? For the major sect, these great elders were the hidden dangers that made them unable to eat and sleep in peace. If they did not find the whereabouts of these great elders, no one could sleep in peace. Fortunately, under the inspection of all parties, a few months later, when someone was tracking a core disciple of the Greatest Heaven sect, they followed the disciple to discover the original hidden valley, and, at the same time, they found traces of a master's recent tribulation. There were also traces of a large amount of spiritual power gathering there. The great elders who came to investigate carefully finally came to a conclusion. The great elders of the Teshiment seemed to have absorbed too much spiritual power and could not suppress it. In the end, they had no choice but to cross the heavenly tribulation and ascend. Logically speaking, such a situation should not have occurred with the demon sealing formation. However, since there were people in the Teshiment who opened the demon sealing formation to trigger the heavenly tribulation, this place might have been opened at the same time. This could also explain why the great elders did not appear in the Teshiment. From the mouth of the core disciple of the Teshiment, a group of great elders learned where this place was originally. After confirming the traces of ascension, they finally let out a long sigh of relief. The supreme elders, who posed the greatest threat, had all been forced to ascend. This was something that even the heavens could not stand and watch. They could not stand the perverse actions of the Teshiment. However, no one knew which loyal disciple of the sect had opened the demon-sealing formation of the Teshiment. He was willing to make such a sacrifice and help all the cultivators in the world. No one knew that the reserve force of tens of thousands of people in the Teshiment including sect master Li and the elders, had been wiped out by Yang Chun. The tens of thousands of people who were alive now were all in a coma and did not know what had happened. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling had returned to Chunyang Palace, but Yang Chun had taken these people to a place that no one knew. Chapter 1436. At present, only Yang Chun knew about this place. Even if it was the target he was waiting for, he would not know that he would pass through here. This wasn't some deep mountain forest, nor was it some secluded valley or mountain peak. It was simply a very obvious path. It was not an official road, but there were a lot of people walking on it. With more people walking on it, over time, it formed an obvious road. It was not spacious, but it was smooth to walk on. Yang Chun built a few rooms in a wide place on this road, which served as a small inn. It was said to be an inn, but even the owner and the waiter, there was only Yang Chun. Anyway, the people passing by on the road were not particularly frequent. There would be 1 or 2 in 10 days or half a month. Yang Chun was completely busy. No one knew that the famous 5th-grade alchemist master in the cultivation world, the master of the Deshang stage, Yang Chun, would start this kind of small business in such a remote corner. Only Yang Chun knew that he was waiting for a person. Although he did not know when that person would pass by here, he was sure that it would be in the next 10 years. Etian, who was confused, had no idea how he appeared in this ghost place. Anyway, when he woke up from his coma, he found himself here. Originally, Etian planned to join the army, and it was on the way to join the army that he passed out. Of course, Etian joined the army not to serve the king or anything like that, but he had his own plans. Etian was born in a family of demonic path cultivators, and he was also a direct descendant of the family. However, ever since he was young, Etian had never practiced any cultivation techniques. It was not that he did not have the talent for cultivation, but his grandfather did not let him cultivate. Hundreds of years ago, the theory of acquired spiritual roots appeared in the cultivation world, and it was said that it was proposed by Master Yang Chun. Subsequently, Master Yang put forward a series of theories about acquired spiritual roots, including how to improve some of the spiritual objects with acquired spiritual roots and so on. After the emergence of acquired spiritual roots, the current head of the Yi family, Etian's grandfather, began to conduct in-depth research according to the theories of Master Yang. The Yi family came from the demonic path, so they did not care about rules and regulations when it came to research. Whatever method they thought of, they would experiment it. Under this kind of unrestrained and unceremonious research, the Yi family's patriarch did come up with a rather heinous method that could be used to improve acquired spirit roots. Spirit items that could improve one's acquired spirit root were hard to come by. From the start, the Yi family's patriarch never expected his descendants to have such heaven-defying luck. Therefore, what he researched was a cultivation technique that absorbed the life essence of others. The research of the cultivation method was successful, but there was a fatal flaw. This kind of cultivation method could only be cultivated by people before they started cultivating. Only then could it achieve the goal of improving the postnatal spiritual root. Once he started cultivating, he would never be able to succeed. For cultivation clans, it was not a big deal to abduct a large number of mortals so that their disciples could improve their acquired spiritual roots. Why would the Yi family, who came from the demonic path, care about the lives of mere mortals? The fatal thing was that the news of the Yi family's patriarch researching this demonic cultivation method was somehow leaked by a concubine disciple of the family. This kind of demonic cultivation method required the slaughter of tens of thousands of cultivators or hundreds of thousands of mortals to help one disciple. In order to avoid attracting attention, not every disciple had the right to use it. Thus, a certain branch family member who was born of a concubine secretly leaked the news of the cultivation method that the clan head had researched out when he had no hope of cultivating. The Yi family was only a small demonic path family, not even a third-rate sect. Soon, the Yi family was surrounded by demonic path experts who received the news. Of course, the patriarch was unwilling to hand over the cultivation method, so the Yi family was easily annihilated. Of the entire Yi family, only Etian managed to escape. This was an escape route that the E family's patriarch had planned ahead of time. Etion memorized the cultivation method passed down by the patriarch and embarked on the difficult path of cultivation alone. To cultivate, one must first kill. If he started a massacre in a certain place, it would be easy for the news to leak, and Etion could not do it alone. Therefore, he decided to join the army and take the opportunity to cultivate in the army. On his way to join the army, he inexplicably fainted while resting in a roadside inn. When he woke up, he found himself in this strange place. Yangchun had been waiting for Etion here. Before he died in his previous life, he had chatted with Old Demon E for a period of time. Old Demon E told him many things, including the demonic cultivation method that Old Demon E used to cultivate and some things that happened when he first started cultivating. Among them was the path that he passed by. Yangchun had been waiting here for almost 7 years. Finally, the young Old Demon E appeared. Etion's appearance did not change much from the Old Demon E of his previous life, so Yangchun recognized him at a glance. In this life, Yangchun relied on the demonic arts taught to him by Old Demon E to be able to have a full Yin and Yang 5-element spirit root. In any case, this was Yangchun's favor to Old Demon E. Yangchun had always been thinking about how to end this karma with Old Demon E. When he had tens of thousands of Taishaman disciples to kill, he naturally thought of Old Demon E. Calculating the time, it just so happened that this was the day that Etion would be born. Therefore, Yangchun did not hesitate to bring the tens of thousands of Taishaman disciples here to wait for Etion. In his previous life, Etion was notorious for his massacres in the army. Before he even started cultivating, he was regarded as a demon and was almost killed several times. The path of cultivation was also bumpy. Coupled with the fact that his entire family was wiped out, Old Demon E developed his surly personality in the future and became the Old Demon E that everyone feared. Yangchun did not intend to change Old Demon Yi's personality. He just wanted to return the favor of Old Demon E for telling him the cultivation method. These tens of thousands of Taishaman disciples must die. Since they were going to die, why not fulfill Old Demon Yi's wish? On one hand, Yangchun did not have to do it himself. On the other hand, he could fulfill the karma between Yangchun and Old Demon E. By making Old Demon E a little more dangerous at the beginning, it could be considered as the interest that Yangchun gave to Old Demon E. When Etion woke up, he found himself in a strange space. Apart from a few thatched cottages and some household items, the rest of the place was empty. While he was in shock, hundreds of figures suddenly appeared in the open space in front of him. Strangely, these people were all lying on the ground motionlessly. If it was not for the fact that their chests were moving and breathing, Etion might have thought that they were all dead. Kill them, and you can leave. A clear voice sounded in Etion's ears. Chapter 1437. The voice was so abrupt that Etion jumped in fright. However, he was still the all-powerful Old Demon E in the future. Etion quickly calmed down and began to ponder. Kill someone? Etion had never been afraid. He was here to kill someone, so why would he be afraid? What Etion was afraid of was his secret being found out. That would be a fatal disaster. The voice only said one sentence and did not appear again. Etion pondered for a long time, but could not find any malicious intent from the owner of the voice. It would not take much effort to kill him. His only concern was whether this person was secretly coveting the E family's newly developed cultivation method. However, how could an outsider learn such a demonic cultivation method just by looking at it? The E family's patriarch had researched it for so many years and did not leave any opportunities for outsiders to exploit. Even when cultivating this demonic cultivation method, outsiders would not be able to see any abnormalities. After understanding this, Etion no longer tried to find out what the owner of the voice meant. Instead, he looked at the figures that suddenly appeared. Soon, Etion realized that they were all cultivators. Etion had never cultivated before, but that did not mean he could not see certain things. These cultivators clearly had a strong foundation, but for some reason, they were all unconscious on the ground. They did not have anything on them that could prove their identity, nor did they leave behind any Dharma treasures or Chinko bags. They were just lying there unconscious. While he was investigating, Etion suddenly realized that one of the cultivators seemed to be waking up, which gave him a huge fright. Now, Etion was a mortal who had never cultivated any cultivation methods. Once this person woke up, Etion could even use his buttocks to think that he would definitely not have a good ending. In a moment of panic, he looked around and suddenly found a sharp knife not far from where he was lying. Without thinking, Etion ran over, picked up the knife, and sprinted to the side of the person who was moving. Being called Old Demon E by the later generations, Etion did not have any psychological pressure when it came to killing people. He had originally planned to join the army to kill people. Now that there was a ready-made expert for him to kill, he could not think of any reason to refuse. With a single slash, blood spurted out. The expert, who seemed like he was about to wake up, only twitched a few times before turning into a corpse. Without another word, Etion began to cultivate the cultivation method in his mind. After a few breaths, Etion immediately felt a warm current flowing into his body from the corpse in front of him. After completing one cycle according to the set of cultivation method, Etion immediately cast his gaze on the other guy beside him. After killing more than 100 people in a row, Etion felt exhausted. However, he was still afraid that the remaining dozens of people would make a move. Dragging his exhausted body, he killed all the remaining people before walking back to the thatched cottage. He started a fire to cook and then rested. By the time Etion woke up, the 200 people he had killed were nowhere to be found. Etion heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to look around, his vision blurred, and more than 200 figures appeared in front of him again. They were still in the same open space, and everyone was still unconscious. The ground was covered in blood. If one person woke up, Etion knew what would happen to him. Therefore, Etion had to pick up the sharp knife and began to repeat yesterday's process. Kill, practice, kill again, practice again, and the cycle began again. In the following days, Etion did not distinguish between day and night. He only knew to kill people mechanically and then rest. The only extra thing was to sharpen the knife. After killing so many people, the sharp knife had become a little blunt. If he did not sharpen it, he would not feel happy killing people. When he killed more than 1,000 people, Etion found that his body had begun to become stronger. Absorbing the life essence not only brought about the improvement of the acquired spirit root, but also the strength of the body itself. The result of the strength of the body was that the number of people he had to kill every day increased from more than 200 to more than 300, and then more and more. Etion did not have any resistance to this, and still continued to mechanically kill and cultivate. Etion counted every day, and after a few dozen days, he had killed more than 10,000 cultivators. By now, how could he not understand that these people were deliberately killed by the owner of the mysterious voice, and it must be to help him? Unfortunately, no matter how Etion acted or shouted, no one responded to him. The owner of the voice seemed to have no intention of communicating with him, and just kept providing cultivators for him to kill. In the past, most of the people he killed were in the foundation establishment stage. Etion had this eyesight and could also detect it. But in the past few days, he had discovered that there were already masters in the Golden Core stage. Who was the mysterious man? What kind of strength did he have? And how could he get so many cultivation masters for him to kill every day? Puzzled, Etion simply let go completely. Anyway, if the mysterious man wanted to kill, he would have done it long ago. There was no need to be so long-winded. After letting go of everything, there was no longer anything to worry about, and Etion's killing became more and more unrestrained. The cultivation method passed down by the ancestor allowed him to clearly sense the changes in his body. Although Etion always had the 5-colored stone on him, Etion never dared to take it out and try to measure his acquired spirit root, for fear that the mysterious man would see through it. Amidst this vigilant and wanton slaughter, Etion counted the number of cultivators killed to be close to 50,000. What frightened him most was that the more he killed, the more masters he killed. At first, he was only in the foundation establishment stage. Then there was a Jidon stage master, and now he has killed dozens of Yuanying stage ancestors. He really didn't know if there would be masters in the Deshang stage for him to kill. He didn't know how much time had passed. Etion didn't know what the situation outside was now, only that he had killed all the Yuanying stage ancestors. He didn't know how many times he had sharpened the wrist knife. The physical body of the Yuanying stage ancestors was so strong. Even in a coma, it was not so easy to kill them. On this day, Etion finally managed to kill the last unconscious expert with much difficulty. Now the masters killed each time were getting fewer and fewer. There were only 20 or 30, but the time taken was almost the same as before. He really didn't know when it would end. Etion was planning to return to the hut to rest, but the voice that hadn't appeared for a long time sounded again, "Take care of yourself." Before Etion could understand what was going on, in a flash, Etion had appeared in another place that was once familiar to him. What hut? What master's body? All disappeared without a trace in front of him. Chapter 1438. The place where Etion appeared was the inn, where he had inexplicably entered that place before. However, in the inn now, except for Etion himself, there was no one else. Looking around blankly, Etion couldn't believe whether his previous experience was real or a dream. But one thing was certain, that was his current physical body had reached a staggering level. After absorbing the life essence of 50,000 cultivators, there was no way that it would be useless. After all, he was the old demon of the later generations. He was only confused for a while and quickly determined the situation in front of him. Without saying anything, Etion turned around and left the place immediately. When he arrived at the secret place, Etion took out the 5-colored stone and began to measure his acquired spirit root. Soon, a smile appeared on Etion's face. The acquired fire spirit root was maxed out, and even several other attributes of the spirit root had been greatly improved. Although it did not reach the point of maxed out, it was enough to meet the requirements of several other cultivation methods. Without anyone tracking him, Etion was completely ecstatic. Originally, he thought that it would take more than 10 years, or even decades, to improve his spirit root. But now it was completely unnecessary. He could start cultivating right away, and then find the enemies who destroyed his family and sect to take revenge. Watching Etion leave, Yangchen's figure never appeared again from beginning to end. The 50,000 Taishaman disciples had been beheaded by Etion, and their bones had become fertilizer for the flower garden of the pure bottle medicine garden. In a few decades, there would be no trace left. At this point, the last remaining reserve force of the Taishaman had been completely destroyed by Yang Chun, and there was no trace left. Etion and Yang Chun only had a friendship before his death in his previous life. This time, Yang Chun sent him 50,000 cultivators to kill, and had already repaid all the kindness. As for how Etion would develop in the future, whether he would become the old demon that everyone in the immortal world would fear, it had nothing to do with Yang Chun. There was no more karma between the two. It had been 8 years since Yang Chun left alone, and it was time to rush back to Chunyang Palace to continue his own cultivation. When Etion went far away, Yang Chun did not pay attention to his whereabouts. He directly launched the shuttle and flew quickly to Chunyang Palace. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling had returned to Chunyang Palace first, but the two women had been very tight-lipped. They did not tell anyone where their family of 3 went when they besieged the Taishaman. All the good things they had obtained, including the storage space left by the Taishaman, had been collected by Gong Sunling's geographical map of the mountains and rivers. The things inside were also secretly preserved by the two of them, without revealing any clues. Without the overt and covert suppression of Taishaman, Chunyang Palace really ushered in the golden age of development. The spiritual power affected by the heaven and earth Wuji spirit suppression formation had completely returned to normal a year after the incident. All the disciples of Chunyang Palace began to immerse themselves in cultivation. It seemed that they did not want to participate in the aftermath of the Taishaman's extermination. During the years when Yang Chan was away, the cultivation world directly set off a crazy pursuit against the remnants of the Taishaman and those who had originally surrendered to the Taishaman. When the Taishaman sect was exterminated, the disciples of the Taishaman who were not in Taishaman became the public enemy of the cultivators. Even the craziest devil who chased after them in the past did not seem to have such vigor now. After all, the pursuit of the devil was just a matter of Taoism to eliminate the devil and defend the Tao. But now, the remnants of the Taishaman, regardless of the Taoist devil or demon, were the targets of everyone's pursuit. The small sect that used to rely on the Taishaman were also crazily retaliated against, and extermination happened almost every day. The smart ones immediately changed their sects and turned to other big sect. Those who were usually arrogant were uprooted. Only some of the spies who had invested in the name of the Taishaman but had never made it public, nor had they shown any connection with the Taishaman. However, these people could not make any waves now, and they even dare not say that they had anything to do with the Taishaman. Some secret sect even directly obliterated a group of people who were in contact with the Taishaman, completely eliminating the evidence related to the Taishaman. It was rare that the Taoist devil and demon did not attack each other. They all restrained their own disciples with a sense of propriety and tacitly developed wantonly. The cultivation world ushered in the most slaughtered, but also the most peaceful period. Naturally, the target of the slaughter was the remnants of the Taishaman, and the peace was all the other cultivators. Chunyang Palace in this tide did not show the mountain and did not expose the water, and even the benefits obtained were very ordinary. However, the high-level members of Chunyang Palace did not have the slightest dissatisfaction. On the contrary, after the destruction of the Taishaman, the high-level core members had a collective celebration of drinking. Even the always cautious master of the palace was rarely unrestrained and drunk. The return of Yang Chun also did not cause any waves. After visiting the head of the palace and the elders, the high-level members no longer gave any instructions to Yang Chun. What he wanted to do was arranged by Yang Chun himself, and they never interfered. As for the absence of Yang Chun and Gao Yu Gong Sunling during the siege of the Taishaman, no one asked about it. Only when the head of the palace received Yang Chen's greeting, the corner of his eyes picked up, and it seemed to show a little inquiry. Yang Chun nodded secretly, and the two tacitly did not say anything. However, on that day, the head of the palace and the core high-level members found a reason to get drunk and seemed very happy. Speaking of it, this time the change of the Taishaman, the head of the palace also indirectly got some benefits. At least the missing elder Wan Qianwan of the Blue Cloud sect had been attributed to the young master of the Taishaman, Li Liheng. Hula Wan Qianwan also belonged to the category of beautiful female cultivators with high cultivation base. She also directly became a victim of the Devil Heart Sutra. The female cultivators who disappeared during that time were far more than those found in Taishaman. At least twice the number. They lost their lives in the previous abduction or later after Li Liheng played with them. Because of the existence of the Demon Seal formation, the Life Source Spirit card could not be found, so Wan Qianwan's Life Source Spirit card had been destroyed in the sect. In the future, there would be no Wan Qianwan in this world, and no one would track down the whereabouts of Elder Wan Qianwan. The beautiful Deshang stage, Dao companion of the head of the palace, became a disciple of the Chunyang Palace. Anyway, everything about her was under the command of the head of the palace, and there would be no future troubles. Of course, from the beginning to the end, the head of the palace did not know the true identity of Wan Qianwan, and never regarded her as any trouble. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling saw their husband return, and they were smart not to ask Yang Chen a word. They only knew one thing. After their husband's trip, the 50,000 disciples of the Taishaman sect never appeared again. It was enough to know this. Chapter 1439. Etion killed 50,000 Taishaman disciples, but there was one person he had never had the chance to see. That person was the former young sect master of Taishaman, Li Liheng. Although Li Liheng was turned into a waste by Yang Lan, sect master Li did not know at the time. For so many years and so many generations, only Li Liheng had successfully practiced the spatial spiritual cultivation method. Even if Li Liheng made a big mistake and even led to the destruction of the Taishaman, Sect Master Li was still lucky enough to think that one day Li Liheng could recover and continue to practice the spatial spiritual cultivation method in contact with the predecessors in the spiritual world. With the guidance of the predecessors, it was not known how many detours could be avoided in cultivation. Sect Master Li had already tasted the sweetness of the previous things. Even if Li Liheng had a criminal record, he would at most be kept by his side at all times in the future, but many times Li Liheng still needed to communicate with the predecessors in the spiritual world. In the heart of Sect Master Li of Taishaman, there has always been a small plan. He was forced to make a hard oath. If he obeyed the oath, he would end up in ashes. As the Sect Master of Taishaman for such a long time, he was high and mighty, and his words were the law. How could he tolerate himself turning into ashes when he crossed the tribulation in the future? Sect Master Li was not a person who would sit and wait for death. He needed Li Liheng to help him get the method to break the heart oath from the predecessors in the spiritual world. He did not see the ascension of Yanglan and Yanglan with his own eyes. He was not sure if the special formation would work, but there must be a method similar to Mu Ming Yuan's ascension in the past. Based on this, Sect Master Li took the unconscious Li Liheng, and then Li Liheng fell into the hands of Yang Chen. This guy was a prelude to the tragedy of Yang Chen's previous life. Although Yang Lan was behind the scenes, Li Liheng was the direct person who came forward that year. After knowing that Yang Lan and Yang Lan had ascended, Yang Chen even thought about leaving Li Liheng's life, and even let him ascend as well. After arriving in the spiritual world, let Li Liheng deal with Yang Lan and Yang Lan. It was also a good thing to let the enemies bite each other. However, after some in-depth thinking, Yang Chen gave up this plan. If Li Liheng ascended, it would definitely lead to the misunderstanding of the spatial spiritual cultivation method. For the time being, it was better not to be exposed. Moreover, Li Liheng's cultivation had been completely destroyed. To treat him to the point where he could ascend, it would cost enough resources to let dozens of normal cultivators ascend. To waste this kind of resources on an enemy that might expose his own arrangements, Yang Chen was not extravagant to this point. In the end, Yang Chen personally killed Li Liheng. He had completely severed the enmity between him and Li Liheng. It could be said that in the mortal world, there was now no real enemy of Yang Chen. Perhaps those who helped the tyrant in the past and took refuge in the greatest heaven sect could barely be counted, but that was only an indirect enemy. Chen, tu, Yang, Lito, tu, Tian, tu, Tian, Tian, and you, Li, tu, he Gao, Ido to Tian to Lito, to you, to Tian E. After meeting with Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, it was naturally another round of love. After returning from the Langya well, Gao Yu and Gong Sunling had been in fear since they knew that Yang Chen's enemies were Taishaman. However, what the two women did not expect was that in the next few years, the situation suddenly changed. The Taoist leader, who was high and mighty, suddenly became the public enemy of the whole world. He was attacked by a group of people, and finally, his sect was destroyed. Looking back at all this, the two women only felt that everything in the past was like a dream. They knew that it was related to their husband, but they didn't understand how Yang Chen arranged it. How did he make the Taishaman the public enemy? Although they didn't understand, the two women didn't want to ask. Since Yang Chen was fighting against the Taishaman for Gao Yu, nothing else needed to be said. Just this thought was enough to make Gao Yu completely loyal. Gong Sunling was no exception. Sharing a secret with her husband would only make her feel more and more sweet. The two women didn't deal with the good things they got from the Taishaman at all. They had been waiting for Yang Chen to come back and make a decision. There were too many things. Even the two women, who were used to Yang Chen's extravagance and wealth, were completely shocked. If so many things appeared in the world, it would definitely make countless cultivators crazy. How to deal with such a large amount of wealth was also a matter that needed to be cautious. If they were not careful, they would get into trouble. The two women also understood this truth, so they didn't touch these things. They kept them untouched and waited for their husband to deal with them. In the geographical map of mountains and rivers, there was a place that only Yang Chun, Gao Yu, and Gong Sunling could reach. The things of the Taishaman were kept here. Not only the resources, but also the ancient books and countless spiritual liquids kept by the Taishaman were all here. These things can't see the light of day. Keep them all for your own use. Yang Chun waved his hand and directly fixed the value of this batch of valuable things. In the future, you will use these materials to practice. What the masters in the geographical map of mountains and rivers need, we will also use these things to satisfy them. Only Yang Chun and the two women knew about this batch of things. The others who knew about it were dead. This ownerless thing could be said to be a real bargain for Yang Chen's family. Now Yang Chun had exchanged good things for Wanbao Tower and a large number of medicinal pills. After a long time, it would not be surprising if Yang Chun had something better in his hands. At that time, these things would quietly become Yang Chen's things, and Yang Chun would have the final say on whether to use them or sell them. In the next period of time, we should avoid arousing suspicion and stay in the sect to cultivate honestly. After Yang Chun sneaked out, he did not intend to give others the impression that his whereabouts were uncertain. It had only been a few years since he came out of the Langya well, so it was not abrupt to stay in the sect to cultivate. The pure bottle medicine garden was thrown into the spiritual liquid lake by Yang Chun together with the dragon gourd. The fusion of the two magic weapons required a lot of spiritual power. Yang Chun did not want to waste those spiritual liquids. These spiritual liquids that the Taishaman had accumulated for many years became the best consumables, enough for a Zhu and a Bai to use. I will filter these ancient books first. If it is worth it for you to see, you can take a look. Hundreds of millions of jade slips were stored here. This was the collection of the Taishaman. For Yang Chun, it was just a good thing to make up for his lack of knowledge. These ancient books were all-encompassing and had everything. There were all kinds of refining, alchemy, and formations. The cultivation methods were even more strange. Yang Chun only had a fire attribute spiritual root in his previous life. He had a far-sighted vision in fire attribute cultivation, but he was much worse in other aspects. Although these things were not necessarily as simple and pure as the original cultivation methods, the stones of other mountains could be used to improve jade, and it just happened to give him enough reference. Chapter 1440. Yang Chun himself was okay. He knew what he lacked. However, Gao Yu and Gong Sunling obviously did not have the same realm as him now. In his previous life, Gao Yu and Gong Sunling died in the mortal world. Such a situation would certainly not happen in this life, but even Yang Chun did not know their future heights. If he wanted to be with the two women for a lifetime, he must let them have the capital to settle down. Gao Yu had the water and fire dragon horn flying sword, the two flying sword, the Emperor's aura, and the original cultivation method. Basically, she was already firmly standing in the ranks of the masters. Not to mention that Gao Yu herself was a very good master of refining. In recent years, Gao Yu's reputation in refining has also spread out. In terms of refining, she almost had a reputation that was no less than that of Yang Chun in the alchemy world. The magic weapon she took out was a treasure that almost everyone fought for. There was no aura of the refiner, which was enough to make her stand at the peak of the refining world. Gong Sunling had the mountain river geographical map, the original cultivation method, and was also a formation master. After the mountain river geographical map absorbed the space of Langya well, the virtual and real alternated. This alone was enough to make Gong Sunling able to protect herself even in the face of a master who was a realm higher than her, without worrying about any danger. This was not counting the hundreds of Deshang stage masters in the mountain river geographical map. It must be known that the masters in the mountain river geographical map could also cultivate and improve, but they lived in another illusory world. This group of masters could even follow Gong Sunling to cross the tribulation and ascend. Hundreds of masters who were almost the same realm as Gong Sunling as helpers. Yang Chun couldn't think of anyone who could beat Gong Sunling in the same realm. The two women were now so excellent, but in the eyes of Yang Chun, there were still some fatal weaknesses. That was their vision. Although they had seen a lot of good things with Yang Chun, they had focused on cultivation under the guidance of Yang Chun before, and some aspects were still lacking. To put it simply, what was the breadth of one's knowledge? Yang Chun could responsibly say that there was basically no good thing in the mortal world that the two women had not seen. What they lacked was a macroscopic understanding of the entire cultivation world. There were some things that couldn't be sensed before reaching the spiritual realm or immortal realm. This was how one's horizons were. Barring any mishaps, the two women would spend hundreds of years in the spirit realm to make up for what they lacked in the mortal world. But now that they had Yang Chun and the Taishaman's ancient books, it could be said that they no longer needed to take detours. The ancient records of the Taishaman were so comprehensive that Yang Chun couldn't find anything that wasn't included. These things and the ancient classics obtained by Yang Chun in the Blue Vault Mountain Immortals Cave, and then combined with those obtained by the Zhao family manor, it can almost be said to have the most complete database in the mortal world. What Yang Chun had to do was to filter the information himself, and then pick out the useful things for the two women, so that they could dabble in all aspects. This was the simplest way to increase their insight and knowledge. Of course, the knowledge on paper was always shallow. If you want to know this matter, you have to do it. The real and thorough understanding still has to be done in practice in the future. But after all, it was better to have knowledge on paper than to explore and practice. Why did the disciples of the big sect have an advantage? It was because of this reason. Now that Yang Chun has more resources in his hands than all the sect, it is natural to let Gao Yu Gong Sunling have the same advantage in this respect. In fact, in addition to Gao Yu Gong Sunling, Yang Chin's other wives and concubines were not easy to deal with. Their cultivation aptitudes were all unique, and the cultivation methods they practiced were also the most outstanding cultivation methods of their respective sections. However, none of them could accurately predict how their future cultivation would be like. Although Yang Chun, who had the memory of his previous life, knew their future achievements, he also changed some things in this life because of his own reasons. Tao Junkie ascended at least 300 years earlier than in his previous life. The defects of the Murong sisters' life source magic weapon have been completely made up by Yang Chun. Shi Wushuang also reached the Deshang stage 100 years earlier than in his previous life. According to this trend, the tribulation and ascension could also be advanced by hundreds of years. Needless to say, Lady Fanghua of Yin Yang Demon School, in her previous life, she did not have great accomplishment in the spiritual world, but in this life, she had already reached great accomplishment when she was in the Yuanying stage, and it was an alternative great accomplishment. Her future achievements could not be estimated. The biggest changes were Shi Shanshan and Sun Qingxue. With the supreme, pure Yang Sword Qi and the original cultivation method left by Ancestor Lu, Shi Shanshan's cultivation direction has been corrected to the extreme. Coupled with the experience of the Demon Continent, it saved at least hundreds of years of adaptation in the spiritual world. In the future, her achievements would definitely be more than the Plum Fairy in her previous life. Sun Qingxue, on the other hand, did not have to abolish her cultivation base and start over again. She did not lose her original cultivation. With the body of the ultimate demonized demonic vine and the guidance of Elder Hua Wanting, the reputation of Snow Dancing Fairy in the future would not be inferior to that of Shi Shanshan. They were all his own women. Although Yang Chun still had some closeness for the time being, he would definitely treat them equally as they lived together for a long time in the future. Now Yang Chun has not yet passed on the original cultivation method to the 7 concubines, but he has already planned to pass on their corresponding cultivation methods after arriving in the spiritual world. Now, it was nothing more than not wanting their respective sect to take advantage of it. These large number of ancient books were useful to everyone, especially after Yang Chen's careful selection. According to each person's characteristics, Yang Chun would pick out a batch of suitable ancient books for them to read. With Yang Chen's vision and insight, these things could at least make them spend hundreds of years less in the future to make up for it. Cultivating for a long time did not mean that there was no need to be afraid of wasting time in cultivation. Since he could take less detours, Yang Chun didn't mind saving some time for his women and the people around him. In the realm of the Dashang stage, in addition to concentrating on cultivation to improve the cultivation base, the rest was the tempering of the mind. He believed that after the Taishaman incident, the mood of the women would not be bad. What they lacked was knowledge in all aspects and the opportunity to learn by analogy. Yang Chun has decided that after he selected suitable ancient books for the women would continue to read and gain knowledge for a long time. Speaking of which, the Taishaman had already perished, and there were no enemies in the mortal world that Yang Chun needed to deal with. The next time was the process of Yang Chun's continuous accumulation of strength, and at the same time, he had to be ready to face the profound heaven sect. Yang Chun believed that at least for hundreds of years, if there was no accident, he would not have any opportunities worth making a move. However, before ascending, Yang Chun still had a lot of things to do. If you count it carefully, cultivation, alchemy, absorbing the fire seed, refining the entrance to the immortal executioner stage, and reading these ancient books, it seemed that each of them took a lot of time for Yang Chun. Chapter 1441. Fortunately, Yang Chun's current spiritual awareness cultivation base has reached the first grade of the Earth Immortal realm, and the three purities secret art has been cultivated to the fourth layer. Multitasking was a piece of cake. Many things could be carried out at the same time and did not interfere with each other. At least the matter of absorbing fire seeds, Yang Chun has never stopped. When waiting to leave in Elanguel, when waiting for Etion in the small shop, Yang Chun has been constantly absorbing fire seeds. Yang Chun has basically absorbed the 5th grade fire seeds, and now he's absorbing all the 6th grade fire seeds. There were a lot of 6th grade fire seeds on hand, each of which took Yang Chun almost 7 or 8 years to absorb and integrate into the yin-yang heaven-burning fire. Even if Yang Chun was now a master of the Dashang stage, but at the level of the 6th grade fire seeds, every kind needed to be careful and no mistakes could be made. Otherwise, so many years of hard work would be ruined. That was, Yang Chun dared to absorb fire seeds anytime and anywhere when he was doing other things. Replaced by anyone, even if it was a master of the ascending level like Tao Junkie, they would not necessarily dare to be so arrogant. Refining the entrance to the immortal beheading stage was even more difficult. Yang Chun was not sure if he could complete this before he ascended. The magic weapon that the Grand Supreme Old Lord refined across the 3 realms was by no means something that Yang Chun, a mere Dashang stage master, could refine within a few hundred years. However, there was no absolute thing in the world. If Yang Chun had not obtained the merit and virtue, he would never have dared to hope that one day he would be able to refine the immortal beheading stage. But now it was different. With the merit and virtue, that transcended the immeasurable, it seemed that refining the immortal beheading stage was not impossible. At least now he could refine the entrance first, and, if he had the opportunity in the future, he could further refine it. This process would last at least hundreds of years, and Yang Chun was not in a hurry. He just refined it step by step. In any case, it wouldn't hinder him from doing other things, even if he diverted part of his attention to focus on this matter. This was just a matter of painstaking work. He would refine it every day. Sorting out the ancient books was an even more arduous task. Fortunately, these ancient books were all recorded on jade slips. If one wanted to read the contents, he only needed to use his divine sense to probe, which was many times faster than the books themselves. With Yang Chun's current spiritual consciousness cultivation, it would not take long for him to explore and quickly read the contents of a piece of jade strip. He could even read several pieces of jade strips at the same time. For Yang Chun, the process of reading the jade slips was almost another form of cultivation. Yang Chun had to read through every jade slip carefully and ponder over its contents. Reading a few pieces at the same time, one after another, he had to review the content. He had to think about whether it was right or wrong. At the same time, he also had to compare it with some things in his memory, and he did not forget to copy a piece of jade strip in his hand. This series of things almost gave Yang Chun no time to rest his brain. Gao Yu and Gong Sumling had always been by Yang Chun's side. Whenever Yang Chun found a suitable ancient book for them, he would give it to them to read. The two women also stayed by their husband's side without any distractions and followed their husband into this kind of secluded reading. In addition to cultivation, the three of them spent the rest of the time reading. Yang Chun did not require the two women to remember these things, but after reading them, they would at least have an impression. Whether it was cultivation methods, pill recipes, refining techniques, or arrays, there were many things in common. Mastering one method would lead to mastering all methods. It was not just some people who set it out of boredom. The two women had never thought that just a simple reading could make them feel enlightened all of a sudden. Most of the time, they only read miscellaneous books or ancient books that had nothing to do with their cultivation or hobbies. However, some of the things in the books would always make them think of their specialization, as if it was another kind of hint. Many things that they could not understand or were puzzled about before seemed to have thought of other possibilities or uncovered the fog in front of them after this unique hint. This feeling of breaking the fog in their minds was really addictive and could not stop. Yang Chen's family of three read like this in seclusion for 50 years. For Yang Chun, it was rare to have this kind of mood to read the hundreds of millions of jade slips of several sects without distractions. Even if he could not get any benefits from these jade slips, the process of reading alone was a rare training for Yang Chun. The Pure Yang Palace continued to develop, and in the past 50 years, nothing particularly big had happened. The other sects were also developing steadily, and there didn't seem to be any major disputes in the past few decades. No one was willing to be deprived of the spiritual power of the whole world again. So as long as one was a cultivator, he would stare at his surroundings to see if there were any remnants of Taishaman. In the past 50 years, the remnants of Taishaman that could be hunted down had almost been killed. Those that could not be found had also fled to the distant sea. It seemed that they would no longer cause too much impact. Basically, the Taishaman's affairs had subsided. Soon, there were not only Gao Yu and Gong Sunling around Yangchun. After returning to the sect and living for 50 years, Yang Chen's other wives and concubines also came to Chunyang Palace one after another and returned to Yang Chen's side. Yang Chen had already prepared the classics that were suitable for their respective characteristics for the women. The number of people reading increased from 3 to 11. It could be said that Yang Chen's family was immersed in reading and did not care about other things at all. Later, the women did not doubt the origin of these classics. All the jade slips selected by Yang Chun were copied by Yang Chun. The parts related to Taishaman were removed from the contents, and there was no trace of Taishaman. There were also many ancient books handed down in the Zhao family manner. All the women thought that they were obtained from the Zhao family. Although there were many such ancient books in their respective sect, they usually did not pay careful attention to them. It was impossible for anyone in the sect to guide the women in this regard, and the ones carefully selected by Yang Chun were suitable for their respective characteristics. After reading, all the women gained a lot. From the time Yang Chun began to read the jade slips to the time he read all the jade slips, it took a full 100 years. In the past 100 years, Yang Chun did nothing else. Whether it was the Zhao family manor, the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave, or the ancient books of Taishaman, they were all read by Yang Chun. Yang Chen's mind was almost filled with all kinds of ancient books. Even if Yang Chun was strong, it was impossible to remember all the ancient books. Hundreds of millions of ancient books, Yang Chun was able to read them all, which was already a great achievement. Reading 10,000 books and traveling 10,000 miles, it seemed that next he should go out and take a walk. Chapter 1442. If there were benefits, Yang Chun would definitely not forget the sect. So many ancient books had been sorted out. If only Yang Chen's family read them, they would not be able to maximize the benefits. Therefore, it was necessary to hand them over to the sect. In the hundreds of years since the Taishaman were exterminated, the world had been settled. The sect that had obtained the ancient books of the Taishaman had begun to relax the management of those ancient books. Relaxing did not mean that anyone was allowed to read them, but a kind of exchange atmosphere had been formed between the sect. Anyway, these books did not belong to their own sect. Everyone got them from the Taishaman. It was normal for them to make a copy and exchange it with others for something they needed. If ordinary cultivators wanted to read these ancient books and get cultivation methods, elixirs, and array diagrams, they had to exchange them with their respective sect's contribution points. The more advanced the ancient book, the greater the sect's contribution points needed, especially some advanced cultivation methods of the Taishaman. No matter which sect it was in, it would require a jaw-dropping number of contribution points to exchange for it. However, it was relatively simple between the sect. Except for the super sect that had obtained the complete collection, the other sects, regardless of whether they were demons or monsters, had obtained part of it. If people wanted to see the whole picture, they needed to exchange between the sect. The super sect turned a blind eye to this kind of exchange between the ordinary sect. They had everything they got from the Taishaman, so they would not take the initiative to stop this kind of exchange between the ordinary sect. They would even take the initiative to provide some advanced ancient book for the various sect to exchange in order to strengthen the relationship of interest between the sect. In the face of the Taishaman, the more widely these ancient books were distributed, the more people saw them, and the more powerless the Xiantian sect would be. They could not really be the enemy of all the cultivators, could they? After more than 100 years of exchange, except for the super sect that had really mastered a batch of core ancient books of the Taishaman, almost everything that each sect wanted had been exchanged from the other sect. At this time, if Yang Chun took out a batch of classics to enrich the Sutras depository of Chunyang Palace, it would not be so abrupt. Even so, when the head of the palace and the core elders saw Yang Chun take out this batch of classics that had been carefully selected by Yang Chun for more than 100 years, they still couldn't suppress their ecstasy, and several core executives almost jumped up and cheered. In terms of talent reserve, the pure Yang Palace belonged to the rising stars, and it was far worse than those old big sects. Especially in terms of inheritance, it is even more pitiful. Even with the classics of the Zhao family manor and Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave, there's still most of the classics that can only be placed there, but there is no way for ordinary disciples to benefit. There were too few real masters in Chunyang Palace, especially those who were knowledgeable, who were even rarer. The previous limitations of the sect also limited the vision of the core executives. Even if Chunyang Palace later flourished, the accumulation in this regard was still far from enough that even the masters who reviewed these classics could not come out. Who dared to let their own disciples try out the classics that had not been examined by the masters? That was extremely irresponsible for their own disciples. Even if they knew that the things obtained by the Zhao family manor and Taishaman were unlikely to have major problems, they did not dare to take risks. After the elders who were responsible for sorting out the classics reviewed them one by one, they would be open to ordinary disciples. As for the inheritance of the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave, except for Yang Chun, no one could recognize the ancient characters, let alone pass it down. It was a pity that Yang Chun had been busy with all kinds of things in the past and did not focus on this aspect. Based on this reason, now Yang Chun suddenly took out such a large number of classics that had been carefully reviewed by Yang Chun to enrich the Sect Sutra depository. How could it not make the core executives, including the head of the palace, overjoyed? According to Yang Chen's introduction, this batch of classics almost covered all aspects of the cultivation world. It had been sorted out by Yang Chen and even limited the scope of reading according to the level of cultivation. It could be said that as long as this batch of classics entered the Sect Sutra depository, the direction of cultivation that the disciples of the sect could choose could directly expand 100 times. What was the comprehensive strength of the sect? In addition to the combat effectiveness of the disciples, this orderly inheritance was also one of the indispensable measuring conditions. The reason why Chunyang Palace could only be a first-class sect and could not become a super sect was that the inheritance was not long enough and the foundation was not deep enough. With this batch of classics, after a long time, it was only a matter of time before Chunyang Palace became a super sect. This was not the most surprising thing. The classics given by Yang Chun were divided into 3 parts. One part could be read by ordinary disciples. This was open to all disciples. As long as they had enough contribution points, they could view it. The second part was for the core disciples, that is, the most loyal disciples of Chunyang Palace. That was the real core secret, which included the most core inheritance of the Taishaman and the Zhao family. Except for those super big sect, other sect could not get it. This batch of core classics directly allowed the core disciples of Chunyang Palace to enjoy the treatment of the Taishaman core disciples. In addition, there was no shortage of other resources in Chunyang Palace. The rapid growth of the core disciples was already a sure thing. The most surprising thing was the third part, which was a batch of classics that Yang Chun had specially selected for the characteristics of the head of the palace and the core elders. It was the most suitable for their current realm. The high-level members of Chunyang Palace, because of their insufficient qualifications, could not improve their cultivation greatly. They were trapped in the Yuanying realm and could not make any progress. Yang Chun spent a lot of effort to use the merit body refining pill to improve the postnatal spirit root of the core high-level members to the limit, making it possible for them to enter the future. However, in the past, Chunyang Palace was, after all, a small sect. Its scope of influence was limited, and its vision was limited. Until now, it did not have the bearing of a big sect. That was not something that could be cultivated in one generation. At least 3 generations of masters could really have the bearing of a big sect. Yang Chen would not pull up the seedlings to help them grow, but he would not let it go. These classics could make up for the shortcomings of their previous vision, so that their state of mind could really grow to the realm of overlooking all living beings. For the rise of Chunyang Palace, Yang Chun would definitely spare no effort. Which elder would not like to care about his juniors like this? The core high-level members of Chunyang Palace were self-aware and knew their own shortcomings. They would never be looked down upon by Yang Chun because of Yang Chun. Everyone knew where everything in front of them came from. Yang Chen's filial piety, everyone was happy to accept it. The origin of these things will not cause any trouble, right? Out of caution, Wang Yong looked at the mountains of classics and asked carefully. Then he was afraid that Yang Chan would think too much, so he added, "If it is troublesome, you don't have to tell us." Chapter 1443. It's not troublesome. Yang Chen smiled and replied calmly, "These things are actually from several different sources." Yang Chan began to introduce, and the head of the palace and several core elders immediately sat up straight and listened very carefully, for fear that they would miss something. This disciple has collected scattered from all over the place over the years, as well as from the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave. These are no problem at all. Yang Chun pointed out a part of it. The Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave has been translated by the disciple, and some of the suitable ones have been selected. The rest can only be used for reference, and it is somewhat outdated. The Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave did not know how many years it has been idle, especially the words recorded in the Jade Slip that no one knows. These things would naturally not be a problem. There was no need to worry about what Yang Chun collected himself. It was all exchanged by Yang Chun with various medicinal pills. It was justifiable. Even if the Taishaman were not destroyed, they could not take Yang Chen's things to say. The batch obtained by the Zhao family manor may have some trouble in the future, but that is a matter after reaching the spiritual world and the immortal world. No one in the mortal world would dare to pursue it. Yang Chen continued. After listening to Yang Chen's words, everyone nodded. These things in the Zhao family manor were indeed a bit troublesome, but as Yang Chen said, it was a trouble in the future, and no one in the mortal world could pursue it. Moreover, these ancient books were purchased by the Tao, Demon, and Ro Cultivator Alliance. Even if they reached the spiritual world, the Zhao family could not risk offending all the sect at the same time to pursue this matter. To put it bluntly, even the Taishaman were involved in this matter. Did the Zhao family really dare to go against the profound heaven sect? Therefore, in this part, everyone did not have to think too much about it. As for the last one, there are some small troubles. Yang Chun continued to say calmly. When they heard Yang Chun say that there were some small troubles, everyone frowned. The small troubles in Yang Chen's mouth were not necessarily small troubles. Everything this disciple seemed to be involved in was not a small matter. In front of the elders, Yang Chun did not give face and laid down 3 restrictions in a row. Then he said, "This part is the core inheritance of the Taishaman." When Yang Chun said this, everyone's face suddenly changed. The core inheritance of the Taishaman had been taken away by a sect master Li when he escaped. Even a major sect did not get it. How could it fall into the hands of Yang Chun? At this time, Palace Master Zhang Jiao and others really recalled that before the greatest Heaven sect extermination incident, Yang Chun once said that the pure Yang Palace only needed to follow several major sects, not to force their way out, not to covet any benefits, not to show the true intention of not showing the mountain and not revealing the water. If the core inheritance of the Taishaman had fallen into the hands of Yang Chun, it meant that Yang Chun had clearly expected the consequences of the extermination of the Taishaman. How is this possible? No one was an immortal. Who could conclude in advance that the greatest Heaven sect, this behemoth, would one day fall down and never get up again? To be able to intercept this batch of core inheritance meant that Yang Chun not only knew the whereabouts of Sect Master Li of the Taishaman, but also had the upper hand in the fight. After the extermination of the Taishaman, all the cultivators in the world searched for 100 years and did not find the whereabouts of Sect Master Li. What did this mean? After the analysis of the things before and after, it was easy to draw a frightening conclusion. The extermination of the Taishaman must have a deep relationship with Yang Chun. Even from a meaning revealed by Yang Chun, it was at least a direct relationship. Such a big thing. How could it not frighten everyone present? So, the matter of the Taishaman. The head of the palace only opened his mouth and did not ask about the following things. He just stared at Yang Chen's face, seemingly expecting a clear answer from Yang Chun, but also seemed a little afraid that he would give a clear answer. Yang Chen did not let everyone down. He nodded heavily in the expectation of everyone. There is some relationship. The Taishaman want to exterminate my Chunyang palace. The disciple naturally can't let them live well. Hearing that Yang Chen said that there was some relationship, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, then looked at each other and saw the surprise and joy in each other's eyes. At that time, the arrangement of the Taishaman against the Chunyang palace was seen through. At that time, everyone present wanted to fight with the Taishaman to the death, but the strength of the two sides was too disparate. Everyone could only swallow their anger, and even later they had to accept the humiliation of Ming Guangrua. Now, Yang Chun just said a sentence, and it let everyone's depression from that year vent out. The extermination of the Taishaman caused public anger. Everyone was happy, but there was no feeling of exaltation from the bottom of their hearts. However, the answer given by Yang Chun to everyone made everyone have a kind of indescribable comfort. It turned out that the Taishaman were exterminated because of the disciple of the Chunyang palace. It turned out that the feeling of completely avenging a great grievance was so carefree and made one's mind clear. Although no one laughed heartily, it seemed that in an instant, everyone felt as if the haze in front of their eyes had been swept away, and even their cultivation seemed to have increased a little. After the joy, everyone thought of other things, and the head of the palace immediately asked, "What about Sect Master Li and the others?" Even the Chunyang Palace had a blue vault mountain Immortal's cave, not to mention the Taishaman. Sect Master Li fled with people, and the major sect couldn't find them. Now Yang Chun had the core inheritance of the Taishaman in his hands. Where did the reserved disciples of the Taishaman go? The things are in the hands of the disciples, and the people are naturally gone. Yang Chun did not hide it, and directly replied, "The disciples left for more than 7 years because of this." These things, Yang Chun told the head of the palace after careful consideration. Sometimes people were like this. Only when they were burdened with some pressure would they have the motivation to move forward. Once there was no pressure, they would instead fall into a state of carefree laziness. This kind of situation was not good, and it was especially fatal for cultivation. The high-level officials of the Chunyang Palace now had such a little clue. The Taishaman were exterminated, and their own sect was on good terms with other major sects. There was the only 5th-grade alchemist disciple in the sect. It could almost be said that the whole world gave them face. There were materials, manpower, many disciples, and countless masters. The people of the Chunyang Palace now seemed to have no pressure at all. It was not the same as when they had to guard against the Taishaman all the time. Yang Chun must give everyone a little pressure in order to let the head of the palace maintain their previous fighting spirit. Otherwise, this kind of slack alone was enough to make Yang Chen's previous efforts go to waste. Yang Chun would never allow such a thing to happen. Therefore, letting the high-level officials know these things was also to let them always think that they still had to face the behemoth Xintian sect and maintain a more vigorous fighting spirit. Chapter 1444. Their own disciple actually killed the sect master of the Taishaman, and even the Taishaman's escape route was completely cut off. This matter, even if it had been more than 100 years, still scared the head of the palace and broke into a cold sweat. Once this matter was known by the Xintian sect, as long as one person from the Chunyang Palace ascended, they would die, and there would be no other possibility. How could such a big event not make the core members frightened? For the Taishaman, the high-level members of the Chunyang Palace absolutely hated them. But even so, they did not suppress their fear of the Taishaman. There was no other reason, above the Taishaman, there was a more terrifying Xintian sect. Yang Chen's purpose was completely achieved. The expressions of the high-level members were absolutely cautious, and their minds began to focus on how to deal with the huge threat in the future. When there were only 8 Yuanying stage masters in the Chunyang Palace, they dared to stand against the Taishaman and not yield. Now the Chunyang Palace was so powerful, and its strength was more than 10,000 times better than before. After a short period of worry, several of the core members immediately became high-spirited. This was the right way. To live in sorrow and to die in peace and contentment was not for mortals. It was more important for cultivators. Cultivation was not to be aloof from the world, but to fight with the sky, to fight with the earth, to fight with people, to fight with oneself. This was the right way. If it was really to be aloof from the world, then why bother to improve the realm? To improve the realm was to surpass oneself. It was to compete with oneself. Looking at the elders so cheered up, Yang Chun was happy in his heart, and a smile appeared on his face. Such a Chunyang Palace would have the opportunity to stabilize the super sect in the future and be qualified to stand in the immortal world. The head of the palace did not ask how Yang Chun solved the Taishaman sect masterly. Everyone only knew that the core inheritance of the Taishaman had fallen into the hands of the Chunyang Palace, which was enough. As for how these inheritances could be cultivated by the core disciples of Chunyang Palace, it was even simpler. The mysterious Heaven sect didn't know that the core inheritances were not passed on to outsiders. As long as a few Taishaman's core techniques were leaked, it would be enough for the mysterious Heaven sect to not pursue this matter. Since there was a core legacy left behind, Yang Chun was not stingy. He contributed a lot of high-grade materials to the sect. What was given to the sect were all brought out by sect leader Li, and the Taishaman's reserves had not been included. Even so, it was still a huge fortune that made one's hair stand on end. At this point, the sect did not take advantage of Yang Chun. The head of the palace and several elders directly refused. Since the item was obtained by Yang Chun, it belonged to Yang Chun. Yang Chun could make a move through Wanbao Tower at the right time. Now that Wanbao Tower was so large, it could easily digest an astronomical amount of stolen goods. Moreover, his own industry was more secretive and safe. As for the sect, when needed, it could be purchased from Wanbao Tower at the internal price of the sect at any time and anywhere. Anyway, everything had to be counted as spirit stones for Yang Chun. He would never take advantage of his own disciples on this. This was also a good way to deal with it. Anyway, after a long time, it was not a big deal for a large-scale business like Wanbao Tower to have a few kinds of high-grade goods. The current Xunyang Palace was not the same as before. What they had in their hands had to be interrogated by others. Whoever dared to do this, there was no need for Yang Chun and Xunyang Palace to do it. It was not known how many masters who wanted to have a relationship with Yang Chun would take the initiative to solve problems for Yang Chun. Palace Master, elders, has the sect ever considered occupying a large area elsewhere, building another stove, and building a Chunyang-side palace? After dealing with the property and putting pressure on the elders, Yang Chun began to discuss another matter. As soon as Yang Chun spoke, several high-level officials were immediately stunned. Wang Yong asked with some surprise, "Other places? The Taishima Mountain Gate, they are willing to give up a piece of land?" It was no wonder that the master ancestor asked this. It was really that in addition to annexing some small sect, where was there a suitable place to set up a sect? The so-called starting another stall, wasn't this the meaning? In recent hundreds of years, it seemed that only the Taishiman Mountain Gate was vacant. It was a blessed place, but it was divided by the four major sect. Could it be that the four major sect took the initiative to show goodwill? It's not Taishiman. Yang Chun shook his head directly. Now the Taishiman Mountain Gate was a time bomb. Except for the four major sect, no other sect could afford it. From the beginning to the end, Yang Chun did not have the idea of fighting Taishiman. He referred to another place. If it's not Taishiman, then where is it? The head of the palace was also confused and asked with a frown. "I can't say it," Yang Chun replied with a wry smile. This was also the place that made him uncomfortable. He knew this place, but he couldn't say it. He could only see whether the elders of his sect had extreme trust in him. Several elders' eyes were wide open. The place that couldn't be said, Yang Chun even wanted to pull them to build a pure Yang side palace. If it weren't for Yang Chun's previous performance that had always been satisfactory, they would have to let Yang Chun talk about it this time. The place that Yang Chun was talking about was the Demon Continent. The core of the Demon Continent had been refined by Yang Chun hundreds of years ago, and there was no more overflow of demonic energy. According to Yang Chun's estimation, those beasts entrenched in the core of the Demon Continent would definitely go crazy without the rich demonic energy. There could only be one consequence of the beasts going crazy. That was, the entire Demon Continent would no longer have ordinary cultivators who dared enter. The strongest Earth Immortal level beasts could definitely kill all the cultivators on the Demon Continent, unless they escaped quickly and quickly left the Demon Continent. Staying on the Demon Continent was definitely a dead end. However, that was the initial situation. As time went by, those beasts would not be nourished by the demonic energy, and their strength would slowly decline. The longer the time, the more their strength would decline. The same was true for the strength of the demonized beasts. If there were more cultivators who entered, as long as they were strong enough, they could definitely survive. The important point was that the demonic energy of the Demon Continent would slowly be absorbed by the demonized beasts. The demonic energy would become lighter and lighter, and eventually disappear without a trace. The Demon Continent without the demonic energy was definitely a treasure land for cultivation. There had been many big sects in the past. Now it was a blank virgin land, waiting for outsiders to reclaim it. With such a big bargain, how could Yang Chun not think about the sect? He had Chunyang Palace, and now he had a part of the Shirwan Mountain, Meiqing Mountain, and Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's Cave, but a cunning rabbit had 3 burrows, and it was not a bad thing to have one more backup. In any case, Yang Chun would let Chunyang Palace get enough benefits on the Demon Continent. Because of the Big Heart Demon Oath, Yang Chun couldn't tell outsiders about the Demon Continent. But now it was an excellent opportunity, and it was also the best time for Chunyang Palace to expand. If he didn't seize the opportunity, he would have no place to cry in the future. Chapter 1445. Yang Chun said very seriously, and the head of the palace was also very serious about it. This disciple of his family had never done anything unreliable. Since he said that there was an opportunity to build a pure Yang palace, then there must be. Even if he couldn't say where it was, this opportunity must be real. The high-level officials had absolute trust in Yang Chun. After exchanging a few glances with the head of the palace and several core elders, everyone nodded slightly and agreed. Yang Chun, if you want to build this pure Yang palace, how many people, how many resources, and how long will it take? The head of the palace was very formal and asked specific questions. The manpower needs to be strong in the early stage, at least 10 masters of the Deshang stage, and at least 2 elders must come forward. Yang Chun had already made a decision in his heart and immediately said his considerations. There will be hundreds of Yuanying stage ancestors and thousands of Jidan stage masters. After the foothold is established, we can transfer the younger disciples and mortals on a large scale. Do you still want to transfer mortals? Elder Zheng Feng keenly caught the words in Yang Chen's mouth and asked in time. There are no mortals there. Everything is started from scratch. However, the land is vast, and it is also suitable for mortals to live. As long as the mortals in the past live for a few generations, the population can multiply, and it can also bring us a large number of disciples. Yang Chen immediately explained seriously, and, at the same time, did not forget to explain the benefits. If it is properly arranged, those mortals will be directly under the control of the pure Yang Palace. There is no need to worry about other sects competing. If possible, it is not impossible to build a few mortal countries over there. Hiss! Everyone heard a burst of cold air. They could build a country over there, which was definitely more promising than being trapped here in Meiqing Mountain. It must be known that now the Chunyang Palace was recruiting disciples, where the former slaves secretly returned to the mortal world to look for them, for fear of being known by other sects. If there was a mortal country under their own control, all the people in the country would be attached to the name of the pure Yang Palace, which would be hundreds of times stronger than it is now. If it was such an environment, not to mention just building a courtyard, the head of the palace would want to move the entire Chunyang Palace. If it wasn't for the fact that the 8 characters of the Meiqing Mountain Chunyang Palace was the site handed down by the ancestors and could not be given up, the head of the palace wanted to personally lead the team to build the Chunyang Palace. My initial estimate is that it will take about 200 years to establish a firm foothold. After 200 years, we can transfer mortals and low-level disciples on a large scale. Yang Chen made a rough estimate and gave such a time frame. The demon continent was such a large territory. It would take at least 100 years to clean up the demonized monster beasts, to clean up the demonic qi, and to create an environment suitable for mortals to survive. Leaving more room for maneuver could also make Chunyang Palace more fully prepared. You choose the manpower yourself. Yang Chen, you are fully responsible for all the matters of the construction of the courtyard. Whether Chunyang Palace can take the opportunity to grow or not depends on you this time. The head of the palace was also a decisive figure. After so many years, he also understood how great an opportunity this was for the development of Chunyang Palace. He did not hesitate and directly gave orders. This disciple accepts the order. The head of the palace was so solemn that Yang Chen also solemnly bowed to accept the order. Yang Chen, this old man will go with you this time to broaden my horizons. As soon as the head of the palace was finished, the ancestor Wang Yong took the initiative to jump out and wanted to go with Yang Chen. Yang Chen said that 2 elders were needed. As the ancestor of Yang Chen, he had a strong cultivation base and was a master of the Deshang stage. His combat power was strong, and he was definitely the most suitable one. Listening to you, it seems that there are also hardships ahead. Count this old man in. Hall Master Meng of the Law Enforcement Hall also jumped out and volunteered. This old man is also a little curious. I want to go and see it, and I will also go with you. Gong Suanling's ancestor Elder Gao Shiyin also said. At once, there were 3 core elders who volunteered to go, and they were all masters of the Deshang stage. Such a lineup made the head of the palace feel relieved and nodded directly. Of course, Yang Chen would not refuse. This time, it was not to enjoy, but to open up, and there would be no shortage of battles. Whether it was the ancestor Wang Yong, or Hall, Master Meng, or Elder Gao, their status was enough, and their combat power was outstanding. It was appropriate to sit in the Chunyang Palace. Palace Master, elders, that place is relatively large. It is estimated that my Chunyang Palace sect can't eat it. When the 3 elders made a decision, Yang Chen said his other idea, it is taboo to eat alone. Maybe we should pull a few big sects together. The territory of the demon continent was larger than the current Dao sects and demon sects. It was absolutely wishful thinking for Chunyang Palace to want to eat it. It was better to take advantage of this opportunity to draw some interest partners, and everyone would divide the demon continent together. With these interest partners, even if Chunyang Palace had to face a strong enemy, looking at this strong interest bond, Chunyang Palace would also have a strong support. It is not fat to eat alone. This is the truth. The head of the palace nodded directly when he heard the words, and several elders also had the same attitude. Why did the Taishaman become the public enemy of the world? Wasn't it because their own sect wanted to occupy the spiritual power of the world and eat alone, which provoked public anger? The Taishaman had only been a lesson for 100 years. In any case, Chunyang Palace would not make the same mistake again. The four major sects of Tao sects, Demon sect, and Monster race each bring 2 sects, and the Rogue Cultivator Alliance also pull 2. It should be almost enough. Yang Chun cautiously said his own suggestion, and then waited for the head of the palace to make a decision. The four major sect of Tao sects is fine, but why do you want to pull in the Demon sect and Monster race? Elder Gung Hong asked doubtfully. I am from Chunyang Palace Tao sects. With this arrangement, will I be accused of colluding with the Demon sect? Elder, it is still the same sentence. It is not fat to eat alone. Yang Chun sighed and replied, My Tao sects are not covering the sky with one hand. Everyone suddenly realized that the Chunyang Palace eating alone was eating alone. Similarly, the Tao sects eating alone was also eating alone. This was the level of vision. Although the elders had become masters of the Dashang stage, their vision of the overall situation was still not enough. If it weren't for Yang Chen's reminder, Chunyang Palace would have offended people for no reason. Since this matter is fully handled by you, you don't have to discuss it with us. You can arrange it yourself. The head of the palace also understood a lot of things in an instant. He smiled and said to Yang Chun, The few of us are still sitting here honestly, reading and cultivating, waiting for your good news. I will follow the teachings of the head of the sect. This disciple will do his best. Yang Chun said no more and directly bowed to leave. Chapter 1446. After coming to Yang Chen's side, Yang Chen's wives and concubines began to study in seclusion. In the beginning, the women were not very interested. Everyone's cultivation methods were different, and each direction of cultivation was different. What was the use of reading so many classics? Among the classics selected by Yang Chen for each of them, except for about 40% of the classics that were related to their own cultivation or interests, the rest were public classics that everyone had to read. Almost all of them were knowledge in various aspects. Astronomy, geography, medicine, astrology, poetry, songs, essays, and stories were almost everything. Not only that, but even some basic alchemy, refining, formation, yin and yang 5 elements magic weapons and martial arts were all included. All the classics. Yang Chun asked them to read them all. Just reading them once was not enough. Yang Chun even asked the women to thoroughly understand these public parts of the classics, to understand and memorize them. Although this was not a difficult thing for the women who had reached the Dashang stage, the women were still somewhat resistant at first. What was the use of reading these? As long as they read the things that were related to themselves, wouldn't it be contrary to their deep and pure cultivation to know so many irrelevant things? However, the women did not dare to disobey the instructions of their husband, especially the kind of monstrous performance that Yang Chun showed in the process of contact with the women, which could be said to be a flawless plan, also made the women put down the resistance in their hearts. Even if they were unwilling in their hearts, they still insisted on completing their husband's instructions. These things were boring at first. They were all basic things. The women did not particularly like them, and they always couldn't read them. It was strange to say that after reading it for a period of time, the women were stunned to find that some things seemed to be very helpful to themselves. There were some things that he couldn't understand in the past that he couldn't comprehend, but after reading these contents, he actually had some new perspectives. Although they didn't dare to say that it was a revolutionary inspiration for themselves, it always gave them another direction to think about, and also gave them some more perspectives to consider problems. Just the content in the public part, with the qualifications of the women, they had read it for 30 years. Of course, except for Gao Yu and Gong Sunling. They have the experience of reading for the first 50 years, and they're more happy to be immersed in it. When they picked up the ancient books that suited their own preferences and cultivation directions, the girls discovered that some of the things that they originally needed to spend a long time in seclusion to comprehend now seemed so simple. Although he still needed time to understand those profound things, he could always find an entry point to solve the problem from various aspects. To put it simply, he had unknowingly achieved an improvement in his state of mind. It couldn't be counted as personal experience, nor could it be counted as an experience in the mortal world. But just by talking on paper, it gave them a lot of experience. The girls had never thought that just reading books would allow them to improve their realms to such an extent. How was this studying? This was clearly closed-door cultivation. After understanding this, the girls became more and more immersed in it. They studied the classics that Yang Chun had carefully selected for them almost word by word, for fear of missing something. From the previous, Yang Chun used the majesty of his husband to force them to read. To the present active research, the attitude alone was earth-shaking change. In fact, the reason was very simple. To use a more modern description, scholars in all walks of life would definitely become more and more specialized in their own areas of expertise. However, those basic subjects must be mastered by people no matter what research direction. Otherwise, the more in-depth the research, the more difficult it would be. The public classics that Yang Chun let the girls read were equivalent to those basic subjects and tool subjects. If they wanted to cultivate, they had to specialize in their own direction. These things were indispensable in the future. The strongest cultivation realm in the mortal world was the Mahayana stage. Even if there were a few special masters of the supreme level, they were only at the human immortal level. But this human immortal was not the same human immortal. The human immortal who ascended to the spiritual world after crossing the tribulation was fundamentally different from the human immortal masters who stayed in the mortal world to forcibly improve their cultivation. Not to mention the spiritual pressure of the cultivation environment. There was a world of difference in the vision of the realm. In the spiritual world, there were masters at the level of earth immortal and heaven immortal as reference. Even if it was cultivation, there would be a higher direction, but in the mortal world, one could only rely on their own assumptions to cultivate. After arriving in the spiritual world, after referring to the experience of the predecessors, one would naturally find the shortcomings in these basic aspects, and then patiently learn to supplement, so that one's vision and knowledge would go to a higher level, and the future cultivation would become easier and easier. In the end, the cultivators of the mortal world were just frogs at the bottom of a well. They thought that fire masters only needed to be proficient in fire, and water masters only needed to be proficient in water. At most, in order to deal with enemies of different attributes, they just needed to understand the characteristics of other attributes. This was like a primary school student thinking that physicists only needed to understand physics and chemists only needed to understand chemistry. As for mathematics and language, they could completely ignore it. Not to mention that they were very partial to other subjects. They didn't need to understand other subjects. Little did they know that a real scientist would master all the basic subjects, and then use the knowledge of these basic subjects to serve their own research. Others did not have the experience of Yang Chun as a great principled golden immortal. Even if they understood this truth, they could not find a most suitable book to study from the vast number of ancient books. Yang Chun was different. With the memory of his previous life, for the cultivation of immortal masters, Yang Chun could give comprehensive guidance without pressure. Of course, it was only limited to the close people around Yang Chun who had such treatment. In addition to his own wives and concubines, that is, the high-level members of Chunyang Palace had guidance in this regard. If others wanted Yang Chun's golden mouth to give guidance, they didn't even need to think about it. In a short period of 50 years of reading, the women did not even deliberately step up their cultivation. But it was also in line with the subtlety of the natural law, and their cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds in these 50 years. Gao Yugong Sunling, Shi Shanshan, Sun Qingshue's 4 wives, Shi Wushuang, and the Murong sisters' 6 concubines, all broke through the bottleneck of the early Deshang stage in these 50 years and entered the middle Deshang stage. All the women were like this, and Yang Chun himself did not fall behind. Hundreds of millions of ancient books were read one by one, as if countless masters gave Yang Chun a comprehensive lesson. Before meeting the head of the palace, Yang Chun had already steadily stepped into the middle Deshang stage. In the past 100 years, Yang Chun has absorbed and merged 12 kinds of 6th-grade fire seeds. The fire attribute spirit power was unique and completely overwhelmed other spirit powers. Now, looking at Yang Chun, he was a pure fire attribute master. Not like before, it was unpredictable. Chapter 1447. This was also intentional by Yang Chun. Yang Chun's goal was to be fully prepared to absorb the 7th-grade fire seed. The yin-yang heaven-burning fire has now reached the most critical moment. Every step it takes and every kind of fire seed it absorbs can affect the success or failure of the yin-yang heaven-burning fire. Returning from the Chunyang Palace Conference Hall, Yang Chun called all the women to his side. The women were still immersed in reading, and they were called over by Yang Chun, and they were a little reluctant. However, Yang Chun just used one sentence to let them completely shift their attention to Yang Chun. If I give your respective sect a chance to expand at least twice your territory, would your sect want it? Yang Chun said it lightly, but the content was like a thunder that exploded in the minds of the women. Except for Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, all the other women had shocked expression. What was the concept of expanding the territory by 2 times? It must be known that Yang Chen's wives and concubines, except for Gao Yu and Gong Sunling, were all genius disciples of the Four Sect. The Four Sect did not know that it took tens of thousands of years or even longer to reach their current scale and status. Yang Chen's light words, could it be compared with the hard work of so many predecessors for so many years? The eyes of the women were all focused on Yang Chun. So many beautiful eyes, the same gaze staring at Yang Chun, made Yang Chun very satisfied. You follow me and left the sect for a long time. Although you will return to the sect every once in a while, the contribution to the sect is obviously not enough. Yang Chun did not explain directly. Instead, he used these words as an opening. Hubby, I now know of an opportunity for you to make a great contribution to the sect. It all depends on whether you are willing to believe me and whether your respective sects are willing to believe me. Husband, what kind of opportunity is it? Shi Wushuang asked anxiously before the other women could. I can't say. Yang Chun shook his head, but immediately added, but I can guarantee that twice the territory is the lowest possible benefit. Husband, we believe you. However, isn't it a little too childish to report this to the sect without any proof? Shi Wushuang frowned and asked. At the end of the day, Yang Chun didn't leak any extra information, which made it hard to explain to the sect. You just have to say that I, your husband, said it. You don't have to say anything else. Yang Chun smiled and explained, my husband can't say it. Naturally, there's a reason why he can't say it. You take the words back. If you are willing, then you have to start preparing. Husband, what kind of preparations do we need? Murong Han knew that this was an important matter. After being with Yang Chun for such a long time, she knew that Yang Chun wasn't someone who spoke without thinking. Since Yang Chun said that there was such an opportunity, there must be such an opportunity. In this aspect, the Murong sisters trusted Yang Chun more directly. Experts, Yang Chun replied without hesitation. The more, the better. The more experts we have, the bigger the territory we will occupy. Husband, if we bring enough experts with us, will we start fighting for territory? Shi Shanshan was more cautious. Hearing Yang Chen's words, she also asked. The territory is very big. Even if you bring the whole sect, you can't occupy it all. Yang Chen replied with a smile. Yang Chun only said that he wanted to bring experts, but he did not say the idea of transferring the junior disciples and the ordinary people. Presumably, everyone would have thought of bringing a junior disciple over, but probably no one would have thought of bringing Immortal over. After all, except for Yang Chun, no one knew what the specific situation was. By the time the major sect reacted, Chunyang Palace had been operating and preparing for decades. It was normal for them to maintain a temporary advantage. Chunyang Palace couldn't compete with the major sect in terms of comprehensive strength at this stage. It could only take some advantages in such a small place. The major sect would not have any discord for Yang Chen's sake. It would also lay the groundwork for the future development and growth of Chunyang Palace. Listening to Yang Chen's words, the women began to have waves in their hearts. Yang Chun would not lie about such a big thing. If he said that there was this opportunity, then there must be this opportunity. Moreover, Yangshan also made it clear that he would give them a great contribution to the sect. If they didn't have such a relationship with Yangshan, it was estimated that they would not know about this matter. After thinking about this, the women began to get excited. If they really found what Yangshan said, it would definitely be a super great contribution for them. The sect had not expanded its territory for many years. The most recent time was when the four sects divided the mountain gate of Taishaman. However, when Yangshan made a move, he expanded the current territory twice. If the sect master knew about it, it would definitely cause a frenzy. The territory was big enough that even the entire sect could move there. This also meant that the major sect did not have to fight for territory. Where else could they find such a good thing? The women now wished they could return to the sect immediately and report the good news to their sect master. After asking Yangshan about all the news that they could learn for the time being, the women began to quickly return to the sect and report to their respective sect masters. Of course, the specific matters had to be discussed by their respective sect masters at Chunyang Palace. Gao Yu and Gong Sunling didn't have to be so troublesome, as long as they followed Yangshan. Anyway, they knew that wherever Yangshan went, they would go. For the two women, Yangshan did not hide anything and told them directly that the goal was the Demon Continent. From Yangshan's previous performance that he couldn't say it, the two women vaguely guessed that it was related to the Demon Continent. Now that they got a specific answer, the two women were also a little stunned. The two women didn't know about refining the core of the Demon Continent, let alone that the Demon Continent had undergone earth-shaking changes. But out of trust in Yangshan, they didn't question it. Next, Yangshan informed Lady Fanghua through a special channel. The two sects of the Demon Sect were naturally Yin Yang Demon School and Wuji Demon School, the two sects related to Yangshan. As for the Monster Clan and the Rogue Cultivator Alliance, they selected the two largest sects and invited their sect masters to come to Chunyang Palace for discussion. On the appointed day, the four major sects of the Dao sects, the Demon Sect, the Monster Clan, and the Rogue Cultivator Alliance invited by Yangshan all arrived. Apart from the four major sects related to Yangshan and Yin Yang Demon School and Wuji Demon School, the sect masters of the Monster Clan and the Rogue Cultivator Alliance did not have any doubts at all, giving enough face to Yangshan and Chunyang Palace. It was related to the future development plan of these sects. Even if the sect masters held an attitude that they would rather believe it, they had to come in person to understand what kind of opportunity it was.